This story opens inside an 8,000 square foot penthouse, overlooking Lake Michigan orchids flown in from Hawaii, vintage champagne, senators and billionaires filling the room. Everything screams perfection. But that's exactly why the collapse hits so hard. While everyone admires the fantasy, the foundation is already rotting underneath. And when the truth finally surfaces, Chloe realizes something devastating. The wealth was fake, the status was fragile, and maybe her marriage was too.
My name is Amelia Sterling. In San Francisco, that name isn't just a name, it's a key. It unlocks penthouses overlooking the Golden Gate and tables at charity auctions so private you have to know someone just to get an invite. It means being the daughter of Harrison Sterling, the real estate titan who always said our family name was the one property he'd never sell. But then the foundation cracked. My perfect world started to shatter at a charity auction we were hosting. Amelia, the string quartet is heavenly! Chloe cooed, air kisses my cheeks while scanning the room. Just something simple, I smiled back. It was a total lie. That smile was an expensive mask. The music, played by a quartet flown in from Vienna, was the cheapest thing here. Our penthouse offered a panoramic view of the Bay Bridge, a monument to my family's power. Rare vintage wine flowed freely. Every major player in Silicon Valley was in this room. My husband, Julian, was holding court by the floor-to-ceiling windows. His laugh echoed with the arrogance of a man whose venture capital firm, Thorn Industries, just closed another monster funding round. He caught my eye and gave me that killer smile. My heart still skipped a beat. Julian Thorn, the golden boy of venture capital whose charm sealed deals from Palo Alto to Tokyo, was supposed to be my perfect partner, or so I believed. I slipped into his home office to grab his bidding paddle for the auction. And that's when I saw it. His smartwatch was on its charger, and the screen lit up with a notification. An email alert. I almost looked away, but the subject line grabbed me. Project Nightingale S&S Asset Liquidation. A sudden, sharp chill went down my spine, that instinct you learn when you grow up with money. Excuse me, Chloe. I stepped out onto the balcony, the city lights swimming below. I had to know more. My hand trembled as I unlocked his laptop next to the watch. I typed Project Nightingale into his email bar. A memo from his legal team appeared. The title hit me like a physical blow. Thorn Industries finalizes hostile takeover of Sterling & Sons properties. The document read like a post-mortem. A fragile house of cards, dangerously over-leveraged. The creditors were ready to foreclose. The feds were launching an investigation. My father, he was on the verge of losing it all. Ruin, that word didn't exist in our vocabulary. It was for other people, not for San Francisco legends like my father. It has to be a mistake, I whispered. The new downtown tower is almost complete. The last paragraph felt like a direct reply. All recent profit reports from Sterling & Sons are believed to be fraudulent. The text on the screen swam before my eyes. Years of bad investments hidden by cooked books. And now it was gone. All of it. The quartet started playing something upbeat. I glanced through the glass and saw Julian laughing with a rival VC, completely at ease. He didn't even notice I was gone. Then I scrolled to the end of the memo. It described a firewall plan, a last-ditch deal, to transfer my father's prime properties to one of Julian's shell corporations. It would shield the assets and leave my father personally bankrupt. The plan had been in motion for months. The memo called his move genius, a perfect escape from a sinking ship. My blood turned to ice. Nothing at the party had changed, but my entire life had just been wrecked. The wine was still flowing. The quartet played on. But the floor beneath me had turned to quicksand. I walked back into the living room, my heels sinking into the silk rug. I marched right up to Julian and grabbed his arm. He leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and success. We need to talk, now. In the office. His easy smile tightened at the edges. Can it wait, sweetheart? I'm in the middle of something big. No, my voice was pure ice. It can't. He excused himself with a practiced grace, his public smile never wavering, and followed me back into the office, the heavy door clicking shut behind us. The music disappeared, leaving only the low hum of the city. What was so important you had to pull me out of my own auction? Julian snapped, his charm vanishing. In the glow of the city lights, he looked like someone I'd never met. My father's company, I said, the words catching in my throat. It's finished. It's all gone. I searched his face for shock or worry or a sign that we were in this together. Instead, I saw the tension leave his shoulders. He looked relieved. I know, he said. Those 2 words cut deeper than anything in that memo. You know? The warning came from my own legal team. He went to the bar and poured a scotch. Neat. He didn't offer me one. I needed to know when the story would break. I had to get my takeover bid in before the whole thing imploded. I just stared, completely stunned. Implosion? Julian, that's my father we're talking about. Your father, he said, taking a slow sip, was a reckless gambler who finally lost his nerve. He was a titan, sure, but he was faking the numbers. The feds has been on his tail for months. Tonight, it all came crashing down. He announced the end of my life, like it was a market report. The room felt like it was spinning. I steadied myself against a shelf of art books he'd never touched. How can you be so calm? We have to call my father. We have to get our lawyers on this. We don't have to do anything, Amelia. He set his glass down. You need to manage your family's crisis. I need to protect my company. A fissure ran straight through my heart. Your company, my firm, my investments, my reputation. He looked at me and his eyes were cold and empty. A total stranger. Our prenup is ironclad, and thank God for it. My team, my money, my entire portfolio, it's all in his blind trust, protected from your father's debts and from you. Each word was a deliberate, surgical cut. This isn't personal, Amelia. It's just business. The Sterling name is toxic now. A liability can't afford. He took a step closer, his voice low. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning. My lawyers had the papers drawn up for 2 months. The breath left my body in a rush. I laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. You can't be serious. This has to be some sick joke. I've never been more serious. He pulled a thick envelope from his suit jacket. He brought divorce papers to our own charity auction. This is the settlement offer. It's generous. Sign it tonight, and we control the story. You get a clean break. He let the alternative hang in the air. If you fight me, you will lose. Badly. And you'll walk out with nothing but your family's shame. I stared at the envelope, my stomach churning. A settlement? What about this penthouse? This is our home. A cruel, smug smile touched his lips. This penthouse is owned by a shell company under Thorne Industries. It always has been. You were just a resident. It's one of my assets. Same for the vineyard in Napa and the cabin in Tahoe. All shielded, all mine. A decade of our perfect marriage turned to ash in my mouth. The homes I designed, the life I believed we were building together, it was all a set. You knew, I whispered, the awful truth hitting me like a wave. You planned all of this. My name isn't on any of it, is it? That prenup wasn't for us. It was to protect you from my family. It's called managing risk, darling, he said, the pet name a total insult. You always have to hedge against your biggest vulnerability. And your father was a time bomb waiting to go off. The shock finally gave way to pure, burning rage. You are a monster. So our entire marriage was just a merger that failed? His face hardened, not with regret, but with irritation. It was a strategic alliance that reached its conclusion. This is how the game is played, Amelia. When a legacy name implodes, you don't ride it to the bottom. You cut it loose. And I am cutting the Sterling name loose. He slid the documents and a pen across his desk. Sign them. Pack a bag. Be out by the weekend. It's the cleanest break. Go to hell. His jaw tightened. Fine, but if you try to fight this, I will crush you. I have the best lawyers in Silicon Valley. You have a ruined father and a family name that's about to be worthless. Just sign the papers. Take the settlement. It's enough seed money to rebuild your life. Rebuild my life. The thought was so insulting I wanted to scream. My own trust fund would be gone, seized by the government with my father's assets. This is your only option. My final act of kindness. Kindness. The word was poison. Suddenly, the office door opened a crack. A chic, dark-haired woman looked in. Chloe, my best friend. Her face was a mask of worry, but her eyes were like steel. Julian, is everything all right? People are starting to notice you're gone. In Silicon Valley, a scandal travels at the speed of light. Julian was completely unfazed. Come in, Chloe. Your timing is perfect. Amelia was just agreeing to the terms of our separation. She slipped inside, shutting the door behind her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She went straight to Julian's side, resting a hand on his arm like she'd done it 1,000 times. The final, disgusting piece of the puzzle snapped into place. You, I whispered, looking from one to the other. The two of you. Chloe actually tried to look sorry for me. Amelia, it's just a better strategic fit. Julian and I have more synergy. How long? My voice was barely audible. Julian answered for her. Long enough. Of course it mattered. God, it all mattered. Because every late night at the studio, every canceled dinner, every secret I thought we shared was a complete lie. Every time I defended his impossible work hours, every time I admired this house he built for us, it was all a performance. Get out, I said, my voice shaking as I tried to hold on to the last shred of my pride. Both of you, get out of my home. My home, Julian corrected, his voice dangerously low. He slid a folder across the marble island. My lawyer will be here at 9 a.m. I advise you not to be difficult. He took Sophie's hand, her hand, and led her out of the kitchen, back to the party, our marriage, our entire life in ruins. I was alone in our glass house on the cliffs, the anniversary party finally over. The last of the fake laughter and air kisses faded into the night. From the window, I watched the stream of expensive cars wind down the hill toward Sausalito. His office was immaculate, except for his laptop left open. It wasn't a blueprint, but an email to his attorney. Subject: Vance separation agreement. I sank onto the custom sofa, the words a blur. He was offering a one-time payment of $200,000 to disappear quietly and forfeit any claim to his assets. The draft promised a swift, private dissolution of our marriage. No Messi's public spectacle. It was all about protecting his firm's brand. My fingers trembled on the trackpad. I saw my father's face, a contractor who built his legacy on a handshake. I pictured a Julian accepting an award, looking so noble. I saw Sophie, his star designer, smirking in the background. My hand pulled away. I would not sign this. You see, maybe it was just the builder's pride he always mocked.
A weak foundation means collapse.
Live, my dad used to say, in a building or a person. The kitchen door creaked open. It was Elena, our housekeeper. The sympathy in her eyes felt real. Mrs. Vance, the catering team has left. What are your instructions for morning staff? I looked at this woman who had been with us for 5 years. I thought of our gardener, our cleaners, good people whose jobs depended on a lie I could no longer live. Give everyone the week off, I said, my voice steady, with their full pay. And Elena, thank you. For everything. She simply nodded, her lower lip trembling. She knew. When she was gone, the silence was suffocating. I was a prisoner in my own show home, married to a man I never really knew. The daughter of a man the world would soon see as a fool. My phone was buzzing with meaningless texts, but I only needed to make one call. I hit the number. He picked up immediately. Dad. The word was a shattered sob. Livy. My father's voice was solid, grounded by a lifetime of hard work and honesty, but the concern was there. The voice that taught me how to read a blueprint. You found out. Julian's divorcing me, and he's taking everything. There's a baby, Dad. He knew, and he's doing this anyway. I heard a deep, angry sigh. I am so sorry, honey. That coward. What am I supposed to do now? I whispered. You fight, he said. I heard that old fire in his voice, the general contractor's command. You are a Rossi. We don't shatter when things get tough. We find the load-bearing walls and we hold them up. You hear me? He wants me to sign an agreement. Don't, my father snapped. Don't you sign a single page until you call Sarah Chen. She's the biggest shark in San Francisco. Promise me. I promise. Good. Now, listen. This guy is going to play dirty. You need to disappear. No social media, no calls to friends. I'm calling Sarah right now. She'll reach out to you. Dad, will you be okay? A foolish question. I've dealt with bigger problems than this pretty boy architect, he said, and I could almost hear him smile. Just promise me you won't give him what he wants. To see you broken. That snake in a designer suit doesn't deserve your tears. A single hot tear fell.
And I swiped it away with fury.
Okay. I love you, Livy. No matter what happens next, you remember that. I love you too, Dad. The line went dead. I sat in the darkness of our giant, empty house, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, and I made a vow not to shed another tear. A plan started to click into place. Call Sarah Chen. Transfer my savings. Pack a bag. Find somewhere he could never find me. The thought of it was paralyzing. A designer clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking time in a life that was now over. My world was gone. My name was Olivia Vance, and overnight that name had become a cage. But in that crushing darkness, something new began to stir. It wasn't hope. It was something colder, much harder. It was the terrifying freedom of having absolutely nothing left to lose. Sleep was impossible. I paced the house like a ghost, past photos of us laughing in Napa, past the sculptures we'd bought together. It all felt like evidence from a crime scene. When the gray San Francisco dawn broke, I was already dressed. A black sweater and jeans, my new uniform. I sat at the quartz island, coffee untouched beside me, my laptop open. The design world had already moved on. His firm's Instagram featured a new post. A rendering of a luxury hotel. My phone was a mix of alerts. A few texts asking if I was okay, but mostly a deep, telling silence from our social circle. And Sophie, I saw with a knot of pure ice in my stomach, had posted a story from their studio. The caption was simple. New Horizons. I heard the click of Julian's expensive dress shoes on the concrete floor before he appeared, dressed for success in a perfectly tailored suit. His tie was knotted just so. He looked refreshed, focused, like an artist who just solved a complex problem. You're awake, he stated, moving to the espresso machine without looking at me. Funny, I couldn't sleep. The sound of my whole life collapsing kind of kept me up. He ignored the jab, the machine hissing as he prepared his macchiato. My attorney will have the final papers by 10. I trust you've considered my offer. I looked at the email on my screen. A $200,000 payment to the Olivia Vanishes Fund. How thoughtful. He finally faced me. It's more than generous, Olivia. You would be a fool to refuse it. If you fight me, that $200,000 will evaporate in lawyers' fees before you even get a court date. And you'll lose. The prenup is a fortress. Your name means nothing without me. Nobody will back you. It's over, Olivia. Sign it. Go rent a little place in the city. The condescending advice felt like a slap in the face. I'm not running away, Julian. This is my home. Not anymore, he said, his voice dropping. The house is in my name. The accounts are in my name. You are in this house because I allow it. You understand. They'll escort you out. Or I will. It's so much simpler if you just leave. I stood up from the stool. My knees unsteady, but my spine rigid. I am not signing anything until I've spoken to Sarah Chen. For the first time, a flash of actual anger crossed his perfect face. Chen is a bottom feeder. She'll take all your money and lose. Besides, my legal team will drown her. He checked his outrageously expensive watch. I have a meeting in the city. A new client. Can't let a little personal drama get in the way of progress. He was going to use our divorce as a fresh start. Of course he was. You knew, I said, the words thick with betrayal. You knew about this baby, and you planned all of this for months. He took a final sip of his coffee. I'm an architect, Olivia. It's my job to see the structural weaknesses in things. I saw the cracks in this marriage a long time ago. I just drew up a plan for demolition. A demolition? By marrying me? Was getting pregnant just the final trigger for your exit strategy? The answer was in his cold, indifferent silence. The space between us was a pile of rubble. And Sophie? I pushed, my voice shaking with rage. Is she part of the new construction? For the first time, his mask of control slipped, replaced by raw anger. Leave Sophie out of this. This is about a clean break. It's business. This was my life. The cry bounced off the high, empty ceilings. My father, our marriage, our baby. This isn't a business deal, Julian. This is everything I have. And that part of your life is over, he snarled, his voice low and final. Sign the papers. Be at the lawyer's office by 5, or I'll have the locks changed. Don't make this ugly. He turned and walked away. The massive pivot door swung shut, and he was gone. The silence he left was deafening. I couldn't just sit here in this art gallery of a house and wait for him to erase me. I immediately called Sarah Chen's office again. Her assistant was apologetic. I'm sorry, Ms. Vance, but we've received a notice of a potential conflict of interest from Mr. Vance's attorneys. A spike of pure panic shot through me. He was blocking me at every turn. I was alone. No, not completely. I found an old duffel bag and stuffed in cash, my passport, my grandmother's earrings, and a burner phone. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I had to get out. On the console table, our photo from the gallery opening caught my eye. My smile was so naive, so proud. His was possessive, the look of a collector showing off his latest acquisition. I pulled the picture from its cold, minimalist frame, ripped it in half, and dumped his arrogant smile in the trash. This estate was a masterpiece of glass and concrete, clinging to the Sausalito cliffs. It was my husband's signature design. I helped choose the fixtures. I picked out the furniture. I thought this was our untouchable home, held together by our future. The black SUV parked at the gate, with 2 men in suits getting out, was the first sign I was already out of time. The first sign something was wrong was the U.S. Marshal at the door. The seats was the notice plastered on the glass of our penthouse. A seizure warrant. This property is now under federal jurisdiction. I stood frozen on the lobbyist marble floor, the chill San Francisco fog clinging to my skin as I stared at the official seal. They were fast. The government was not playing games. My family's entire world was officially a crime scene. I dug through my purse for my key fob. The heavy, bespoke metal felt alien in my hand. I held it up to the elevator panel. Nothing. The light stayed stubbornly red. They'd already locked us out. Mom, you can go up. A man in a plain navy suit stepped in front of me. He looked young, almost gentle, but his eyes were like stone. This is my home, I whispered, my voice a thread. I'm sorry, ma'am, this residence is sealed by court order. Only authorized bureau personnel can enter. He gestured with his head toward a dark sedan parked across the street. The building is under surveillance around the clock. I stared at the car, feeling like an insect pinned to a board. My father, Marcus Vance. Is he up there? For a second, the agent's professional mask cracked, revealing a hint of pity. No, ma'am, he hasn't been here since sunrise. A team escorted him to the federal building downtown. We haven't seen him since. My knees buckled. They had him. My father, the man who taught me chess and collected rare books, was in some sterile government room. Do you know where he is? Has he been arrested? My apologies, I don't have access to that information. You'll need to contact his lawyer. The same lawyer who'd have been ghosting my calls all day. I just gave a tight, painful nod. I walked back to the curb where the town car charged to Julian S. Company account. A detail that now made me sick was waiting. I told the driver to head to the Vance Group headquarters. The tower, a glass monument to my father's ambition, was under siege. News vans swarmed the street, satellite dishes aimed at the building like cannons. A mob of reporters was held back by police lines. A handful of angry protesters waved signs at the main entrance. I slid on a pair of oversized sunglasses, kept my head down, and told the driver to take me to the service entrance in the back alley. The head of security, Miguel, recognized me instantly. He'd have been with my father for 3 decades. He used to sneak me macarons from the boardroom when I was a little girl. Today, his face was a canvas of pure worry. "Miss Vance, you shouldn't be here right now, Miguel. I have to get to my father's office, please." He hesitated, glancing nervously at the chaos out front. "It's a circus. The feds are everywhere, hauling out boxes. They're tearing the whole place apart. It isn't right, what they redoing to him. Please, Miguel." He let out a long, heavy sigh and nodded once. He used his master key to call the service elevator. "Go straight to the top, but you have to be fast." They've got agents posted on every floor. The elevator doors slid open on the 50th floor. The normal, buzzing energy of the office was gone, replaced by a silent, methodical invasion. Men and women in dark suits FBI were wheeling out dollies stacked high with hard drives and document boxes. They were pulling cables from servers, unplugging desk phones, and cordoning off entire sections with yellow tape. The huge bronze sculpture of the Bay Bridge was missing, leaving a sad, vacant space in the atrium. The few employees left were huddled in stunned, quiet groups, whispering. I felt like I was sleepwalking through a nightmare toward the corner office, my father's inner sanctum. The massive mahogany door was open. 2 agents were inside. One was taking pictures of everything. The other was carefully boxing up the architectural models on my father's shelves. "Can't be in here," the agent with the camera said, his voice more tired than hostile. I am his daughter. The 2 agents shared a quick, unreadable glance. The older one, a man with weary eyes and slumped shoulders, gave a slight nod. "You have 60 seconds. Do not touch a single thing." I stepped into the room. It felt desecrated. The giant teak desk was completely bare. Its surface was coated in a fine gray film of fingerprint dust. His custom chair was pushed aside, as if my father had been ripped right out of it. I could almost feel the terror of his last few moments in this office, his empire collapsing. My eyes darted around the room, desperate for something, a sign, a message, anything. And then I saw it, hidden inside the scale model of the first children's hospital he ever designed. It was a hiding place only I would ever know about, a tiny, encrypted flash drive. My heart began to pound against my ribs. I looked over at the 2 agents. They were now arguing over how to properly tag a framed antique map as evidence. I walked over to the model, pretending to admire the detailed work. In one smooth movement, my hand slipped inside, closed around the drive, and slid it deep into my coat pocket. "Time's up, Miss Vance." The older agent's voice was flat. "I'm sorry for all this. For what it's worth, your dad was a huge donor for the city's youth orchestra every year." His attempt at kindness felt like an insult. I just nodded, unable to form words, and walked back out into the chaos. I didn't wait for the service lift. I took the fire escape, the burning in my thighs a welcome distraction from the noise in my head. I burst through the door into the private parking garage, the cool, gasoline-tinged air a shock to my skin, and that's where I saw her. Sophia was leaning against a concrete pillar right next to Julian's brand-new sports car. She was on her phone, laughing. A light, carefree sound that felt obscene on a day like this. Then she saw me, and her laughter caught in her throat. She hung up the phone. "Elara." "Oh my God, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing." My voice was eerily steady. "Here to survey the wreckage? Maybe pick out some new art for the penthouse you'll be sharing with my husband?" She actually had the nerve to look hurt. It's not what you think. Then what is it, Sophia? Please. Explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like you were sleeping with my husband while you were supposed to be my best friend. Did you two have fun dissecting my flaws when I left the room? Her face turned to ice. The concerned friend I knew vanished, replaced by someone sharp and cruel. You always had to be the center of attention, didn't you, Alara? With your brilliant father, your brilliant husband, and your precious little baby on the way. It was sickening. Did it ever occur to you that Julian might want a woman who understands his ambition? Someone who wasn't just another prize for his perfect little life? The sheer poison in her words stole my breath. This wasn't just some fling. This was a bitter, ugly jealousy she'd been hiding for years. So this was the plan all along? A hostile takeover of my life? It was always going to end this way. She shrugged, glancing at her immaculate nails. Your whole life was a fantasy. Your father's company. Your picture-perfect marriage. It was all just a story you told yourself. Julian and I, we're a team. We understand how the real world works. You see a shortcut to the top, I snapped back. You were always so pathologically jealous of my family, our name, of him. You could never just be happy for me. Happy for you? She scoffed, a short, nasty laugh. While you were playing house and picking out colors for the nursery, some of us were out here fighting for a seat at the table. You were just born into it. Well, sweetie, the family business is officially dead. Welcome to the real world. Sophia's laugh echoed in the cold, empty garage. She touched a new diamond pendant hanging at her throat. Oh, and Julian's big venture capital summit in Napa last month? I was his +1. Seeing the wine was absolutely incredible. She smirked, her perfume smelling like expensive victory. He leaving you, Alara. It's done. I just stood there, a high-pitched ringing in my ears. Napa. He brought me back a bottle of Merlot from that trip. I thought I was going to be sick. I stumbled against the cold concrete, fighting for breath as the reality of his betrayal slammed into me. The sealed manila envelope from my father's lawyer felt like a lead weight in my purse. My hands were trembling as I ripped it open in the back of a taxi. Inside, there was a single, heavy, brass key. It looked like something that would open a 100-year-old safe deposit box, not a lock in modern San Francisco. There was no letter, just the key. And then I noticed them 2 tiny letters engraved on the head, MV. My father's initials etched onto a small brass key, and beneath them a number, 418. It meant absolutely nothing to me. A safe deposit box? An old file cabinet? Just then my phone vibrated with an unknown number. I answered, my voice just a whisper. Alara Vance? A man's voice said, cold and smooth. Who is this? My name is Mr. Davies. I am an associate of Marcus Vance. You missed your 10 a.m. meeting. I know. My client's rather generous offer. Expired then, Miss Vance. His patience is gone. The agreement stated you were to vacate your home by noon today. Since you failed to do so, we are now proceeding. My blood ran cold. What does that mean? It means as of noon today, the access codes to your apartment were reset. All of your belongings are being moved to a secure storage facility. Your key card is now useless. If you try to go back, you will be trespassing, and we will call the authorities. He did it. My husband actually locked me out. You can to do that! That's my home! You were a resident, Mrs. Reed, not an owner. Mr. Croft has rescinded that right. It is perfectly legal. The details for the storage unit are in your email. You have 30 days to get your things, or they'll be auctioned. The divorce papers are attached to that email as well. I recommend finding an attorney. Goodbye. The phone clicked off. I just sat there, watching the Chicago skyline through my tears. No home, no money. My husband was a psychopath. I had nothing but the clothes I was wearing, my handbag, and this odd, heavy key. Where to, miss? Arthur asked, his voice kind. His eyes in the mirror were full of pity. I had no place to go. A hotel? My credit cards were linked to Julian's account. He'd have canceled them already. My personal account had maybe $7,000. In Chicago, that's barely a month's rent. My gaze landed on the key again. 418. Arthur, I said. Does that number mean anything to you? Like a building? He'd driven for my father for almost 30 years. He considered it. Not an address, but there's an old private depository on the Gold Coast. Very discreet. It's called the Sentinel Depository. I've heard they use numbers, not names. It's on Bellevue Place. It was a long shot, a tiny flicker of hope. Yes, Arthur. Let's go to Bellevue Place. The Sentinel Depository was a fortress of black marble, sandwiched between two modern high-rises. No sign, just a single brass plate next to a steel door. 418. My heart pounded. This had to be it. I found a small speaker grill and pressed the call button. A small camera lens adjusted, focusing on my face. Yes? A clipped voice said through the speaker. My name is Clara Reed. I'm here about account 418. There was a pause, and then a heavy electronic buzz as the door unlocked. The air inside was cool and silent, smelling of lemon polish and old money. The lobby was stark, empty except for a large oak desk with a stern-faced man behind it. Miss Reed, he said, his voice low. We've been waiting for you. A chill went right through me. Waiting for me? Who was? Your father. His instructions were very specific. The man held out a gloved hand. The key, if you please. I handed it over. He examined it, nodded once, and stood up from his desk. Follow me. He led me down a long, quiet hallway lined with identical burnished steel doors. 415, 416, he paused at 418. He inserted the key. It turned with a satisfying thud, and he swung the heavy door inward. You have 1 hour, he stated. The room is completely soundproof. There are no cameras inside. When you are finished, simply close the door. It locks automatically. Leave the key on the desk on your way out. He turned and walked off, the thick carpet silencing his steps. I stepped inside. It was a small, cold, quiet room. In the middle was a simple steel table. On top of it were 3 items: a thick file folder with my name written in my father's hand, a small suede pouch, and a stark black satellite phone. My hands were shaking so much I could hardly open the folder. The first line read, My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, it's even worse than I imagined, and I am so sorry for the part I played. I failed you, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. First, I love you. Don't believe anything you see in the media. You have always been my greatest achievement. Second, you're in terrible danger. Not physical danger, but the danger of being completely erased. Julian Croft is not who he says he is. Your marriage was a lie, a strategic operation from day one. He was placed in your life by the Apex Fund to get to our family, to our research, to find a way in. He is a corporate sociopath, and I was the fool who handed you to him. This business collapse isn't a total lie. The financial hit is very real. But it's also a cover, a way to conceal a bigger secret. The whole truth is too risky to write down. That phone is going to ring just once. You must answer it. The pouch contains what I salvaged. It's not much, but it's clean and untraceable. Use it to disappear. Be clever. Trust no one. Not our legal team. Not our friends. Especially not anyone in Julian's circle. They are all watching. My deepest regret is that I never taught you how to fight dirty. I tried to shield you from the ugliness of my business. But in doing so, I left you defenseless. Please forgive me. When that Fofnos rings, you'll know what to do. Be strong. Be the Reed I know you are. All my love. I read it again and then again. The words wouldn't stick. Julian, a corporate plant. Our marriage, a total fraud. It felt like the room was spinning. The Apex Fund. I knew the name. Damian Pierce, their CEO, was my father's biggest enemy. He was at a charity event just a month ago. I remember seeing him and Julian laughing together. It meant nothing to me at the time. My father used to call him a shark in a handmade suit. I opened the suede pouch. Inside, on a bed of satin, was my mother's silver locket, the one she never took off. Beneath it was a thick stack of bearer bonds. I quickly counted them. $1 million. It was a fraction of our old life, but it was off the books. It was a lifeline. And under the bonds, a passport. An Irish one. The name read Oif Kelly, but the photo was me, with short black hair I'd never worn. Clara Reed was gone. In her place was this Oifi Kelly, with a new birth date and everything. The passport was flawless. My father hadn't just worried this might happen. He prepared for it. A new identity, an escape route. My mind was reeling, and as I stared at this stranger who was me, the satellite phone screamed. Just once. I jumped, my heart hammering my ribs. Answer it! My father's words flashed in my mind. I grabbed it. Hello? There was a crackle of static and then a disguised digital voice. That key opens more than one door. I went rigid. Who is this? A friend of your father's. Now listen carefully. You have a tale. A private investigator named Hale. Julian has him on payroll. He followed your driver from the law office. He's parked across the street in a black SUV. License plate is 7 Victor Lima Bravo 502. Do not leave through the front. Cold dread washed over me. Followed. Of course Julian would have me followed. What do I do? I whispered. Back wall of the vault. Third panel from the left, bottom right corner. Press it. There's a hidden door to a utility tunnel. It connects to the basement of the hotel next door. Go out the back delivery entrance. A town car will be waiting. The driver's name is Silas. He will get you somewhere safe. I can't just get in a car with some stranger, I stammered, my voice shaking. The other option is to walk out that front door, right into Julian's trap. Hale's job is to document everywhere you go, everyone you talk to. Julian will not stop until you are broken and broke. That $1 million is useless if he knows you have it. Trust is a choice, Clara. Your father chose to trust me. That is all I can offer you. The line went dead. I was alone in the silence of the vault, the phone cold in my palm. My head was spinning. This was crazy. Hidden doors, disguised voices, getaway cars. This was the plot of a movie, not my life. This doesn't happen to women from the Gold Coast. But then, most women from the Gold Coast don't get their lives torched by a sociopath husband and a disgraced father. I looked at my mother's locket, the bonds, the fake passport. My father made mistakes, but he wasn't reckless. He built this escape hatching for me. He knew this was real. My choice was clear. I tucked the locket and the bonds into an inner pocket of my jacket. The passport and sat phone went into my handbag. I folded his letter and slipped it into my pocket, needing to feel it close. I found the panel. It was perfect. Impossible to see unless you knew it was there. I pressed the bottom right corner. A wall panel slid open with a soft hiss, showing a dark corridor that smelled like concrete and old electricity. I took one last look at the vault, the tomb of my former life. Then I stepped through. The panel closed, sealing me in darkness. A second later, a faint emergency light blinked on. I hurried down the hall, my footsteps loud in the quiet. It ended at a heavy steel door. I pushed it open into a huge, messy storeroom reeking of bleach. I could feel industrial dryers humming through the floor. I moved between shelves, toward the daylight of an open bay door. I peeked out into the delivery alley. At the end of it, a black town car was idling. A big, serious-looking man in a dark suit stood beside it, watching my exit. When our eyes met, he gave me one quick, barely there nod. That had to be Silas. I took a deep breath, gripped my purse, and sprinted to the car. The back seat smelled of new leather and something clean, like cedar. Silas, the driver, was built like a wall and said nothing. His face was stone, but his eyes seemed to see everything. He didn't ask any questions. He just met my gaze in the mirror and said, "Buckle up, miss." His voice was a deep, calm rumble. We drove for what felt like an eternity. He took a strange route through Chicago, heading up the Kennedy, cutting through side streets in River North, then doubling back towards the lakefront. He was making damn sure we weren't being followed. The cold, efficient way he moved was both chilling and weirdly comforting. This wasn't some action movie anymore. This was actually my life. We finally slipped into a private garage under a nondescript modern apartment building in Lincoln Park, the zoo. It felt quiet and hidden, a different universe from the glass penthouse I used to call home. Marcus led me to the third floor in a silent key fob elevator. He unlocked apartment 3A with a physical key. The place was compact, clean, and had personality. Gray walls, a brand new sofa still stiff from the factory, a small kitchen. It screamed corporate housing, furnished by a single phone call. No photos on the walls, no books, nothing personal at all. It was just a space, totally anonymous. Fridge is full, Marcus said, his voice flat. Bedroom's that way. Clean sheets are on the bed. This place is a ghost. It has no links to you, your father, or anyone. It was paid for with cash. Here, you don't exist. He set a new, basic smartphone on the kitchen counter. This phone is clean. My number is the only one in it. Emergencies only. Don't call anyone from your past. Not for a while. How long do I have to stay here? My voice was barely a whisper in the sterile room. Until it's over, or until you use that passport and vanish for good. He looked at me then, his expressions a strange mix of pity and business. Your father, he wanted you to have a choice. A real one, those bonds, the new ID that's your parachute. Argentina, Switzerland, anywhere. You could be Natalie Vance by tomorrow morning. Live a quiet life, totally off the grid. And what if I don't want to just vanish? A hint of a smile played on his lips. Then you stay and you fight. But you have to know, the people you're fighting don't have rules. They've already taken your money, your home, and your name. They will come for everything else if you let them. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well. Even if it's somewhere else, quietly. I'm not the quietly type, I snapped back, surprised at the sudden fire in my own voice. I didn't think you were, Marcus grunted. I'll be in touch. Do not leave this apartment. Don't use any food delivery apps. There's a laptop on the table. It's secure. You can follow the news, but do not sign into any of your old accounts. They'll be watching for that. They? Your husband, his lawyers, Reed Capital, maybe even the feds. Take your pick. He moved to the door. Get some sleep. You look like you've been through a war. And just like that, he left. The deadbolt clicked shut. I was alone. Completely and utterly alone for the first time since my life had imploded. The silence was deafening. I collapsed onto the couch. The adrenaline that had fueled me for days finally gave out, leaving a deep, hollow crater of exhaustion. I was a fugitive in my own city. I had a fortune in bearer bonds and a fake passport sitting in my purse. A grim stranger was my only lifeline, and my husband wanted me destroyed. The burner phone felt like a rock in my pocket. I pulled it out, along with my father's note, reading his last words again. A controlled demolition. What in the world did that mean? Was he trying to tell me the bankruptcy wasn't what it looked like? Or was I just grabbing at straws? I needed a lawyer. I needed a killer. Someone who could stand up to Ethan army of corporate assassins. But how could I possibly pay for one? Those bonds were my escape hatch. Using them for a legal battle against a hedge fund billionaire felt like trying to stop a tidal wave with a bucket. I opened the cheap laptop. It booted to a blank screen. I opened a browser and navigated to the Chicago Tribune's website. Our story was the lead business headline, but the world was already turning the page. The details were just sickening. The sheer scope of the alleged fraud, the prominent families who were completely ruined. The SEC was calling it a classic Ponzi scheme. My father was being painted as a charismatic fraud, a Madoff of the luxury hotel business, and then I saw a small sentence about me. Hayes' daughter Chloe is married to hedge fund titan Ethan Reed. Reed's office declined to comment. Of course it did. He was hiding behind his wall of lawyers, letting my father and me take all the heat. I made a cup of instant coffee and sat at the table, just staring out at the fog clinging to the building across the street. The shock was finally wearing off, being replaced by a cold, hard fury. It felt sharper than my grief, and a whole lot more useful than my fear. Ethan, Ava, David Reed. They had all worked together to ruin my father and throw me away like I was nothing. They had turned my entire life into a hostile takeover, and I was just an asset to be liquidated. I would not run. I couldn't. Running meant they'd get away with it. It meant everything my father built, for all his flaws, would be wiped off the map forever. It meant Ethan and Ava would get to live in my home, spend my family's money, and toast to the naive girl they broke so easily. No, I opened a new file. At the top, I typed 2 words, the plan. Ethan's courtship was a backdoor acquisition of Hayes Hotels by Reed Capital. Ava was a part of it from day one. My father saw it coming, and he built me an escape plan. This bankruptcy isn't real. A controlled demolition. I stared at the words I'd just typed. The list was pathetically short. It was all just theory and wild guesses, the frantic notes of a woman holding on to one cryptic phrase from her father. I had no evidence. Nothing that would even last a minute in a real court. I needed proof, and I needed to know what actually happened to my dad. I picked up the clean phone Marcus had given me. I dialed the single number in its memory. He answered on the first ring. Yeah, it's Chloe. I need 2 things from you. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. I'm listening. First, I need you to find out where my father is. Is my father under arrest? Is he free? What's his legal status? He posted bail an hour ago. $10 million from the last of a Cayman account. He's at the peninsula under an assumed name. The feds have his passport, and he's cooperating for now. A wave of relief washed over me so powerful it actually hurt. He was out. He was safe, at least for the moment. Can I see him? That's a horrible idea. That hotel is swarming with federal agents and other interested parties. A meeting paints a bullseye on both of you. Use the phone he gave you. That line is safe. Okay, I said, a new idea already taking shape. I need everything you can find on David Reed. His finances, his partners, and specifically any connection to my father, Michael Hayes. I need to know if he knew my father's company was in trouble, and if he profited from the collapse. I need a paper trail. Marcus was quiet for a long second. You're asking for something very difficult and very dangerous. Men like Reed, they bury their tracks under layers of shell corporations and offshore banks. It's expensive to uncover, and it's not what your father paid me for. He wanted you safe and 1,000 miles away from here. I'm already in it, Marcus, I said, my voice like ice. They just haven't finished the job yet. So, are you going to help me or not? Another long pause. I could almost feel him weighing my father's instructions against my own determination. I'll make some inquiries. It's going to take time, and it's going to cost you. A very big piece of those bonds your father left you will be gone if we go down this road. Is this really how you want to use your escape fund? It's not an escape fund, I snapped, staring at the words screen. It's a war chest. A dry chuckle came through the phone. All right then, stay inside. I'll be in touch. And Chloe, he added, try to not do anything reckless. For the next 2 days, I was a ghost haunting that apartment, a prisoner of my own life. I survived on instant noodles and stale crackers. I kept the financial news on a constant loop. I avoided social media like the plague. I tried my own research on the secure laptop, but the corporate filings were a jungle of legalese designed to confuse. The new phone Marcus gave me was silent. My old phone was a useless brick in my bag, a souvenir from a world that no longer existed. On the 3rd day, the silence finally broke. Not from Marcus, but from the sharp buzz of the burner phone he'd left me. I grabbed it. Hello? It was that same weird, voice-distorted sound. Your father needs to see you. He can't risk your normal line. Get to the Art Institute, the Michigan Avenue entrance. Go to the modern wing, near the huge Chagall windows, at 2:05 p.m. exactly. He will find you. You will have a 30-second window. Don't be early, and don't be late. Is he okay? He's managing. But the situation is changing. You need to be incredibly careful. We are fairly certain you are still being followed. The call cut out. I checked the time. It was 11 a.m., 3 hours to the meeting. I showered and put on the same clothes I'd been wearing for what felt like a week straight. It was all I had left. My reflection in the mirror was a pale, haunted mask, but my jaw was set. I saw a new kind of steel in my eyes, something I didn't even recognize. Good. I took $500 cash from our emergency stash, a stupid risk, but I was desperate and slipped out. I walked 10 blocks in the wrong direction, then ducked into a CVS to buy a Cubs hat and a pair of dark, oversized sunglasses. I rode the L train downtown, switching lines twice to be safe. I surfaced in Millennium Park, my heart pounding. Blending with the tourists, I made my way to the museum. At exactly 2:04 p.m., I walked into the cool marble silence of the Grand Hall. The place felt like a church, quiet and massive. Afternoon light was pouring through the huge windows. I headed toward the Impressionist wing, my shoes silent on the polished floors. The bench he mentioned was right there, empty. I sat on the cool wood, my back to the art, facing the vibrant chaos of an old Monet painting. My watch clicked to 2:05. A man in a janitor's uniform sat down near me, on the other side of a velvet rope. He never looked at me. The bill of his cap pulled way down low. He smelled of bleach and old wax, but I knew the set of his shoulders, the way he held his head. "Dad," I whispered. The name was barely a breath. "Don't look at me," he breathed back, his voice raw with stress. He made a show of wiping down the bench. "Just listen. We have almost no time. Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm okay, for now." That bail was just an act, a tactic to make them think I'm playing their game. "But Chloe, you have to listen to me. This is critical. Ethan is more dangerous than you can ever imagine. He wasn't just my father's protege, he was a snake. He was feeding my father terrible information, leading him straight into the trades that would bankrupt Vance Capital, just like he planned. He bet against our own company using secret offshore accounts. He made a fortune as our family fell apart. Hearing him confirm it felt like a punch, even though I already knew it in my gut. "I'm not signing those divorce papers," I whispered, my voice hard. I refused to let him get away with this. "Good girl, but you have to be smart. He's about to make his next move, and it will be big. He wants you isolated, to make you look unstable, and then remove you completely. You're a loose end. The cash and the passport I gave you are your way out. Please, Chloe, take it. Go to Zurich. That key I gave you." "The key? For the safe deposit box? With the letter?" "No," he said, his voice suddenly sharp. "That key is for the main vault at Valmont Bank in Zurich. Your code is 419. The bonds and passport were just a decoy. The real money, everything I managed to save, is in there. It's more than enough for you to live on for the rest of your life. A world away from here. A numbered Swiss bank account. A hidden family fortune." It felt like something out of a spy thriller. "How much?" I asked. My head spinning. "Enough that you will never have to hear the name Ethan Thorne again. But you have to go now. Tonight. Marcus can get you to O'Hare. You have the new passport. Go." "What about you?" I asked, my eyes burning with hot, angry tears. "You want me to just run and hide while you take the fall for this? While you go to jail?" "I dug this hole, Chloe. I got arrogant. I cut corners. I honestly thought I was smarter than all of them. This is me paying the price. But you had nothing to do with any of it. I will not let my mistakes ruin your life, too. Please, Chloe, for my sake. Go to Zurich." I saw Ethan's smug face and Isabella's triumphant smirk in that garage, and pictured a lifetime of looking over my shoulder. No, Dad, I'm not running. He destroyed my life. He tore our family to pieces, and I am going to claw back every single thing he took from us. My father was quiet for a long, heavy second. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with an emotion I couldn't identify. Maybe pride, or maybe it was pure terror. Then you're going to need a weapon. My father, Conrad Vance, he's the key. He's old school. He keeps paper copies of every single important deal. He doesn't trust the cloud. His penthouse on the Gold Coast has a study with a locked filing cabinet. If there's any hard proof of his dirty deal with Ethan, it's in that cabinet. But that building is a fortress, and my grandfather is a truly ruthless man. He isn't like Ethan. Ethan is a snake striking from the shadows. My father is a shark. He will tear you apart if he even thinks you're weak. Then I'll have to be smarter, I said, a wild, reckless plan already taking shape in my mind. How do I get in? You can't. There's no way. It's impossible. I never should have said anything. His voice became desperate. My time's up. They're watching. Just remember, Zurich is the answer. It's your escape plan. It's your only safe move. I love you, kiddo. Be so careful. He stood up, shoved a dirty rag into his pocket, and shuffled away without looking back. His shoulders were slumped, just some anonymous janitor lost amongst the priceless paintings. I just sat there for what felt like an hour. The faint smell of cleaning spray in the air. Zurich was safety. A comfortable prison, maybe, but safe. But staying here meant starting a war. A war I had no idea how to win. My cheap Bernsteiner phone vibrated in my purse, making me jump. I pulled it out. It was Marcus. Yeah, we have a problem, Marcus said, his voice low and tight. It's your husband. He's done waiting. He's making a play. A very smart and very public one. What are you talking about? Turn on your laptop, he told me. Any major news website. I left the museum, found a bench in a quiet garden, and opened my computer, connecting to the public Wi-Fi. I clicked the first link for a live news broadcast, and there he was, Ethan, standing on the steps of the Chicago Board of Trade, looking impossibly handsome and somber in a dark suit. A wall of microphones was aimed at his face, and Isabella was standing just behind him off to one side. Her face was a perfect picture of a worried, supportive wife. She was wearing a simple but stunning silk dress. I knew it instantly. It was my dress from my closet in our home. A white-hot, blinding rage ripped right through me. A reporter shouted a question. Any comment on allegations you knew about the Vance Capitol collapse, Mr. Thorne? Ethan held up a hand, playing the part of a man crushed by his own integrity. I cannot comment on an active investigation. I can only say that I, like every other investor in Vance Capital, am the victim of a devastating fraud. My heart goes out to all the families who lost their savings and their jobs. He paused, letting the fake sympathy sink in. My sole focus now is my family and protecting the small amount of privacy we have left. My wife, Chloe, is understandably shattered by her grandfather's actions. She's taking some much-needed time away to process this unbelievable tragedy. I am asking the media to please respect her privacy. My wife. He said the words like he was branding me. Another reporter yelled, "Is it true? You've initiated divorce proceedings, Mr. Thorne?" Ethan's face collapsed into a perfectly rehearsed mask of pain. That is a deeply private, personal matter. I will only say that the toll this has taken on my family has been immense. My only priority is protecting my family and my team at Thorne Industries from any further harm. Thank you. He turned, placing a firm, possessive hand on the small of Isabella's back as they moved up the stairs.
Zilza.
The perfect picture of solidarity. The tragic, handsome couple, bravely facing a storm they did nothing to create. The message couldn't be clearer. He was the noble, suffering husband. I was the unstable, pregnant heiress of a criminal, a mess he was heroically cleaning up. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. My stomach twisted into a painful knot. I knew exactly who it was. I answered, holding the phone to my ear but saying nothing. I see you're not at the apartment. Ethan's voice was smooth, like silk wrapped around a razor blade. Or at any of your favorite coffee shops. Are you hiding, Chloe? It isn't a very flattering look. What do you want, Ethan? I want you to stop being so difficult. You saw the news conference. The story is already set. You are the delicate, grieving wife, and I am the man holding everything together. We can do this the easy way, or we can make it an absolute nightmare for you. Your choice. You had no right to let her wear my dress. The words tasted like poison. A low chuckle came from his end. Oh, darling, it's just a dress. Isabella needed something appropriate for the cameras. Besides, it always looked so much better on her, don't you think? Let's talk about our settlement. My patience has run out. The offer is now $500,000. Take it or leave it. Go to hell, Ethan. I am trying to be reasonable here, Chloe. But if you want to make this impossible, he stopped, and I could hear the smug smile in his voice. Did you really think that cheap wig and sunglasses would fool my security? The Northgate Rehabilitation Center. Really? Visiting your dear old dad. A cold fear clutched at my heart. He had me followed. Of course he did. His usual private investigator, maybe someone new. I thought I was being so careful. Leave my father out of this, I whispered, my voice breaking. Oh, but he's at the very heart of it, my dear. He's the sickness that's ruining your life. And thanks to your family reunion, the U.S. attorney is going to wonder what you're plotting. Conspiracy's a nasty charge. He was threatening to frame me, to make me a co-conspirator in my dad's real estate fraud. You're bluffing, am I? Try me. $500,000, Chloe. It's more than you're worth. Sign the papers and I'll make this whole mess with your father go away. I have friends. I can get him a slap on the wrist. But if you fight me, I'll bury you both. I'll make sure you drain every penny of your father's hidden land trusts on lawyers right before you share a cell with him. He knew. He knew about the trusts. How could he? Unless he was just guessing, hoping I would break. I stayed quiet, my heart hammering my ribs as raw panic flooded my brain. I'll take your silence as a sign you're finally thinking straight, he said, his voice turning cold and sharp. But this offer has an expiration date. You have 48 hours to get out of Chicago. Go anywhere you want, just stay out of my life and my business. If you are still in this city after that, I will make you regret it. He paused, and his next words were filled with so much poison it felt like he'd hit me. And tell your father to come pick up his broken little project. I'm done with her. He started this. He can be the one to deal with it. He can come get his failed, useless daughter. You're his problem now. The call ended. I just stood there, completely frozen, staring out at Lake Michigan. The sun was sparkling on the waves. People were laughing on the pier. The entire city just kept on going. His words kept repeating in my head. Tell your father to come get his trash, his failed, useless daughter. I was nothing to him. I was less than nothing. Just a piece of garbage he had to get rid of. A loose end to be tied up. The anger that had been burning inside me just vanished, replaced by an ice-cold, sharp certainty. This wasn't about protecting my name. This was about survival. This was war. I pulled out the burner phone, the one I kept in a safe deposit box. I didn't even think twice. I dialed the only number saved in it. A robotic, quiet voice answered on the first ring. I'm not going to the Caymans and I'm not, I said, my own voice steady and as cold as steel. Tell my father the escape plan is off. Tell him I need a totally different kind of assistance now. I hung up. I looked down at the old skeleton key in my hand. The key that was supposed to buy me a quiet life. I shoved it back into my pocket. It wasn't a key to freedom anymore. It was the key to a war, and I was about to fire the first shot. The focus from Julian's call was like a jolt of pure adrenaline. Fear was a luxury I just couldn't afford anymore, and feeling sorry for myself was a dead end. He had turned me into a piece of trash he wanted to throw away. And in that awful, ugly moment, I found a weird kind of liberty. I had nothing left to lose but the fight itself. I didn't go back to the hotel. If Julian knew about the clinic, then the hotel was compromised. I walked south, my mind racing through possibilities like a chess master. My father's warning echoed in my ears. They'll be watching everything you do. His rival was a shark, but Julian was a viper, and that viper was living in my home. I needed a new headquarters, somewhere he would never think to check. A plan started to click into place, a crazy and probably reckless plan. I used cash to buy a prepaid debit card at a drugstore. In a small electronics shop, I picked up a cheap tablet and a tiny thumb drive. At a thrift store, I bought black jeans, a gray hoodie, and some beat-up sneakers, my new city camouflage. I changed in the bathroom of a diner, shoving my designer clothes deep into the garbage can. I looked like any other person on the street, totally invisible. Then I went to the one place Julian had legally barred me from ever going. Our very first apartment. It was in a gloomy brick building in a rundown part of Pilsen. The doorman barely looked up from his phone when he took the letter from my lawyer. He just waved me toward apartment 10B. The place was a small, dusty box. Inside, stacked with a terrifying lack of care, were the pieces of my old life. My clothes were crammed into black garbage bags, my shoes in a tangled heap, photo albums, my grandmother's tea set, my old finance textbooks, my yoga mat. It was like a tomb for the woman I used to be. Julian didn't just move me out. He tried to erase me. My entire life shoved into a few hundred square feet of paid storage. I didn't have time to get sentimental. I started digging, not for memories, but for weapons, in a box labeled Old Files. I found my old work laptop. It was password locked and probably wiped clean, but it was a start. I grabbed it. In another box, I found the small fireproof safe where I kept our important papers. The key was on my old keyring, which Julian now had. I found a small crowbar in a toolbox that was also tossed aside, and I pried the lock open. My old passport, useless, my birth certificate, my diploma from Northwestern, and at the very bottom, a small metal case. Inside wasn't jewelry, but a single, slim flash drive. My flash drive. In our first year together, when I was full of hope and a naive idea of partnership, I'd helped Julian design his company's data security. I was the tech whiz, the one with the background in finance and code. I insisted on backing up all crucial files, contracts, patents, investment data on a secure, encrypted drive just in case. He laughed and said I was paranoid, but he went along with it. "As long as you have the key, darling," he'd said, kissing my head. I designed the encryption myself. The password was the exact date and time of the first trading algorithm I ever wrote for his firm. I was such a romantic idiot. Later, as he became more secretive about his work, I forgot all about it, and he had clearly forgotten that he ever gave me the master key to his entire business empire. My hands were shaking as I plugged the drive into the tablet. I entered the password, the drive loaded, a list of files popped up, neat, organized folders, finances, personal, Blackstone Holdings, patents, trusts, internal memos, Donovan. I forgot how to breathe. I clicked on the Donovan folder. Most of it was boring business stuff, meeting agendas, and project outlines. But one file, labeled Project Cerberus Internal, jumped out. Cerberus, the three-headed dog guarding the underworld. The perfect code name for a plan to destroy a competitor. I opened it. It was a scanned document, an internal memo. Not a legal contract, but it was incredibly detailed. It was dated 3 years ago, between Blackstone Holdings and some shell company. The subject: a strategic initiative concerning Donovan Industries. The language was all corporate nonsense, but the goal was perfectly clear. The two companies would secretly cooperate to sabotage and bankrupt their shared rival. It laid out a plan for using high-frequency trading to manipulate the market, creating the perfect storm for a hostile takeover. The digital signatures belonged to Julian Blackstone and my father's biggest business enemy. It wasn't proof of a crime, exactly, but it was proof of a conspiracy. It proved my husband was in bed with my father's rival for years, long before he asked me to marry him, before he whispered all those lies about us, about our future. The encrypted drive felt heavy in my hand. This was the plan for the attack, not the final smoking gun. I needed more. I needed proof of that a fraud he was using right now to tear down my family's company. I copied the financial records to the tablet and a hidden drive disguised as a pen. I erased the access logs from the main drive. I pocketed the hardware, all the evidence. As I slid the bookshelf back to cover the broken safe, my burner phone buzzed. It was Leo, his voice tight with alarm. "Chloe, the plan's changed. Your father, he's lost it. He's on his way to Julian's penthouse right now." "What? Why?" Julian called him personally. He told him to come get his trash. My father, he would never let a threat like that go unanswered. A hot, fierce pride swelled in my chest. Where is he going? The Pinnacle Tower. He's almost there. My blood turned to ice. He can't. It's a trap. Julian will have him thrown in jail. Or worse, Chloe. He knows. He doesn't care. He told me to tell you 10 minutes, be there and watch. Watch what? The start of the end, Leo said, and the call went dead. 10 minutes. The penthouse was a 45-minute drive through midtown Chicago traffic. It was impossible, but my father never made empty threats. If he said 10 minutes, he meant it. And he wanted me there to see it. I slammed the hidden safe panel shut, ran out of the apartment, and sprinted to the street. I hailed a cab, shoving a handful of cash at the driver. East Side, the Pinnacle. Get me there in 15 minutes, and there's another $300 for you. The driver, a tired-looking man with eyes that had seen everything, just grunted and hit the gas. We tore through the streets of Chicago, the cab's desperate speed matching the storm inside my head. I gripped the encrypted drive in my jacket pocket. 7 minutes. The city lights blurred into long streaks. What was he thinking? He was out on bail, his whole world collapsing. A public fight with Julian would land him right back in a holding cell. Was this just one final, reckless act of self-sabotage, or something more? The drive felt warm. The Icarus files. The taxi screeched to a halt in front of the glittering skyscraper. I threw another wad of cash on the seat and bolted. I ignored the marble lobby and slipped down the service alley. I'd use this back way 100 times for early runs or to duck paparazzi during some market panic. The code was always the same, 9218, our wedding anniversary. So predictable. I typed it in. The light flashed green and the heavy lock groaned open. He never even bothered to change it. The arrogant fool. I rode the clattering, grease-smelling freight elevator straight to the penthouse level. It opened into a bare concrete hall. Our private apartment entrance was right there. Another keypad. I tried our anniversary again. A loud, angry buzz. Access denied. He'd changed the locks. I was shut out, just one door away from the life he was destroying. But I knew the secrets of this building. I'd personally approved the security specs. I knew about the override panel on the service ledge just above our floor, a forgotten detail from the initial blueprints. I took the fire stairs up one flight, found the utility room, and popped the cheap lock. The master key was missing, but a platinum credit card did the trick. I yanked the emergency release. A steel grate slid back, dropping a ladder down. I climbed out into the wind, 60 floors above Manhattan. The wind tore at my coat. The glittering view was both beautiful and sickening. I edged over to the side and peered down. Our penthouse terrace was right below me, an absurd stage with Italian furniture and a blazing fire pit. Through the huge living room windows, it looked like a human aquarium, and I saw them. Damon was pacing, phone glued to his ear, his face a hard mask of fury. His little assistant, Sophia, perched on the sofa, fidgeting with the strap of her purse, the Birkin bag he bought for me. And then I saw my father. He wasn't dressed like a ruined man. He wore a dark, perfectly fitted coat. He just stood there, utterly still. His hands were folded loosely in front of him. He looked patient, almost detached. Not like a man who'd lost everything, but like an admiral inspecting a failing ship. Damon snapped his phone shut and immediately began shouting, his arms cutting through the air, but the triple-paned, soundproof glass turned his rage into a silent film. My father didn't even blink. He just let Damon's tantrum exhaust itself. Then my father's lips moved. One brief, calm sentence. Damon's face twisted into something worse. He lunged forward, stabbing a finger at my father's chest. My father didn't move an inch. He said something else, his expression unchanged. This was their final meeting, but not the one Damon had imagined. My father wasn't there to beg for me. He wasn't there to negotiate a settlement. He was there to deliver a judgment. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy with cold, and zoomed the camera in. The image shook, but their faces were sharp and clear. I hit record. Down on the street, something else caught my eye. A car. No, not just a car. A blacked-out Suburban, the kind governments use, long and menacing. It slid to a quiet stop right in front of the building. A driver in a dark suit stepped out and stood by the door. Then another Suburban, identical to the first, pulled up behind it. And another. A silent, intimidating procession of raw power. 6 of them, forming a perfect, hostile line in front of my home. Drivers got out of each SUV, standing by their vehicles like a disciplined security force. It was a flex so audacious, so out of place on a downtown street, it took my breath away. This wasn't some high-end car service. These were instruments, symbols of a fortune so deep it didn't even notice market crashes or federal inquiries. This was my father's answer. This was his opening move. Damon, in the middle of another rant, must have noticed my father's gaze drift to the window. He turned, looking down. I watched his expression crumble. The rage melted into confusion, then into pure open-mouthed shock. He walked to the window, just staring at the fleet of urban assault vehicles below. Sophia joined him, her hand flying to her mouth. My father hadn't come in a limo or an Uber Black. He'd arrived with a motorcade that screamed old money and untouchable power. The message was brutally clear. You think I'm finished? You think you have me cornered? Look again. My father turned from the window and said one final thing to Damon. Damon whipped around. His face was now pale with a sick, spreading terror. The whole script had just been set on fire. The shark just realized he was in a tank with a whale. My father then glanced at his watch, gave a small, curt nod, and walked with unhurried steps toward the penthouse door. He wasn't thrown out. He left entirely on his own terms. He didn't look beaten. He looked like a king who had just fired his court. Damon stood frozen, watching my father leave, then looking down again at the waiting convoy. Sophia was clutching his arm, her face a picture of pure panic. The elevator doors would open. My father would step in. The trash had been taken out with a kind of quiet, absolute power that never makes the news. I stopped the recording. My hands were perfectly steady. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp feeling of victory. The whole thing was brilliant. Savage theater. In less than 10 minutes, my father had destroyed Damon's confidence. But the cars were never the point. They were just a spectacle, a beautiful distraction. While Damon was staring at that motorcade, stunned by that display of raw power, he wasn't thinking about the offshore servers or the ghost accounts in Zurich. I looked down at my phone. I had the video. I had the leverage. I had the first nail for his coffin. But as I watched the first SUV pull away, a colder realization hit me. My father's performance wasn't just for Damon. It was a message for me. He knew I would be watching. He needed me to see that he was not broken, that our family name still carried a terrifying weight, even if it was a different sort of power now. He was teaching me how you actually win a war. Not in a deposition, not at the start. You win it in your opponent's head. He was showing me that perception is reality, and a magnificent show is the most powerful weapon you can have. The last Suburban turned the corner and was gone. The performance was over. Down in the penthouse, Damon was still at the window. Sophia was trying to pull him away. He shoved her back, his face a wreck of humiliation and impotent fury. He turned and slammed his fist on a marble console. The game had changed. The weak, pregnant wife he was trying to ruin had a father who could summon a private army. In just 10 minutes, that supposedly bankrupt old man showed more real power than Damon had built in a lifetime of leveraged buyouts and shell corporations. I put the phone back in my pocket. The wind off the river was ice cold. I looked out at the city that I had helped him conquer. Damon thought he was calling my father to come collect his broken little girl. But my father didn't come for me. He came to send a warning, to prove that the first step to total victory is making your enemy doubt everything he thinks is real. I climbed back down the ladder, my mind already working on the next steps. The show was over. Now the real battle would begin. I had one piece of the puzzle, but I needed them all. I had to get into Damon Vance's private office. Back in the service corridor, my burner phone buzzed. I picked it up. The same scrambled voice. The display went exactly as planned. Your father's play was successful. Your own situation, however, is now incredibly dangerous. Damon is cornered, which will make him desperate and violent. A wounded animal is always the most deadly. Your current safe house is compromised. A new location is ready. I don't need another safe house, I said, my voice quiet and hard. I need access to Damon Vance's personal office. Tonight. A long pause on the other end, just the sound of static. That's a suicide mission. The security is military grade. Vance is there right now. The risks are my own, I told him. My father took his pride. I'm going to take his empire. So, are you in or are you out? Another stretch of silence. Then the voice came back, flat and empty of emotion. There is a charity gala at the Guggenheim tonight. Vance is a major donor. His attendance is required. His wife is out of the country. He'll probably go back to his office alone between 10:30 and 11 p.m. His personal bodyguards are off on Wednesdays. You have a 30-minute window from 11:15 to 11:45 while the office is empty, except for Vance, who will be in his private suite on the top floor. The security system is a Citadel Defense Series 7. The override code is 1027. My blood ran cold. 1027. Sterling's son's birthday. The same code he used for everything. The signature of a true narcissist. How do you know that? Sterling is a creature of predictability who idolizes your husband. The code was a sad little tribute to their partnership. Damon and Sterling, partners sharing a secret code. The thought of that bond, that loyalty, was more revolting than any financial fraud. The suite door has a biometric lock. The key card will be on Sterling's person. The locked file safe is a German import. It requires a key and a 6-digit combination. And the combination? We don't have it. You'll have to get it from him or find a way around it. The voice turned sharp. There is zero margin for error on this, Elena. If you get caught, your father can't help you. Sterling will call the police, and he will press every charge he can. You will go to prison. Damon will use it to finalize the divorce and have you declared an unfit mother. This is the absolute point of no return. I looked down at my hands. They were perfectly steady. Give me the address. The voice gave me an address in the financial district, one of the most secure towers in the city. A car will be waiting for you on the next block, engine on, starting at 11:30 p.m. It leaves at 11:46 sharp. If you are not in it, you're on your own. Understood. One last thing. For the first time, his voice cracked. Your father can know about this. He would try to stop you. It has to be your decision, your battle. I know, I told him. Thanks. I ended the call, standing in the building's vibrating service hallway. I had hours. I needed supplies and a solid plan. I had to become someone new. I wasn't Chloe, the heartbroken wife. I wasn't Chloe, the trust fund kid. Tonight, I was a phantom, a thief. My 10 minutes were up. I had to go. I drained the last of my savings on a motel room near the museum district, paying cash for a week so no one would ask questions. The room smelled like old cigarettes and failure, but the door had a decent lock and no one could see in the window. It was perfect. I spent the afternoon getting ready. I bought a small flashlight, a cheap lockpick set that looked like a toy, a roll of electrical tape, and a pair of thin latex gloves from a hardware store. At a thrift shop, I found my cover, a plain, dark dress and a simple black coat, forgettable enough to disappear on Nob Hill. I twisted my hair into a tight knot at the back of my neck. Almost no makeup. My grandmother's sapphire earrings were the only thing connecting me to my old self. I put them on, their familiar weight a strange comfort. I slipped the encrypted hard drive into a sealed pouch and tucked it inside my coat. My only weapons were information and guts. The lockpicks felt like lead weights in my purse. I took a car service to Nob Hill, stepping out into the foggy night air. The gala was a block away, a beacon of noise and light. I could see the valets, the press cameras, and the river of designer gowns flowing up the museum steps. I kept to the shadows. I walked the block, using the quiet side streets until I found the address. Damon's mansion was a monument to modern power. A five-story fortress of glass and stone on a sprawling corner lot, protected by a sleek steel fence and perfect gardens. It screamed new money, untouchable. Lights were on in the first 2 floors. The study, my source told me, was on the 2nd floor, the room with 2 massive windows that looked out over a private courtyard. I found a dark entryway across the street and forced myself to wait. The cold began to bite. Time slowed down. I watched Bentleys and lucid airs drop off guests at other mansions. My heart was beating like a drum against my ribs. This was completely insane. I was about to break into the home of one of the most vicious investors in San Francisco. And for what? A ledger that might not even be real. But this was about more than just proof. It was about taking my life back. Julesian had stolen my home, my trust, and my future. My own father, with his constant need to protect me, had stolen my voice. Tonight, I was taking something back. I was going to steal their darkest secret. At 10:42 p.m., a black sedan pulled up. A driver opened the rear door. Damon Blackwood emerged. He was tall and severe, with silver hair and a face that looked like it was cut from rock. He wore a custom suit that probably cost more than my entire apartment. He didn't look like he was going to a charity event. He looked like a wolf who had just bought the museum itself. He walked up the stone path, unlocked the huge front door with a tap of his phone, and vanished inside. My countdown began. I waited, forcing my breath to be slow, steady. The house staff was gone. Damon would be in his study. He'd get a drink, look at the overseas markets. My window of opportunity was impossibly small and getting smaller. At 11:17 p.m., I crossed the street, my shoes silent on the damp pavement. The block was dead quiet. I slid through the security gate unlocked, thank God, and went up the 5 steps to the massive front door. My mouth was completely dry. I saw the biometric reader next to the door, a Citadel Security Mark V. I keyed in the code I was given, 0915. A soft green light pulsed. A faint click echoed from the lock. I pulled the heavy steel handle. It moved like it was on oil. The door swung open without a sound. I was in. The entryway was enormous. A polished stone floor sat beneath a wild sculpture of bent steel that doubled as a chandelier. A staircase seemed to float into the darkness above. The air smelled of filtered air, expensive aftershave, and power. It was utterly silent. I gently closed the door. I had less than 30 minutes. I moved quickly, every nerve firing. The house was a museum of his victories. Modern paintings from famous artists, glass cabinets full of industries, awards, framed stock certificates. This was the home of a man who collected companies. I found the study at the end of a long, sterile white hall. The door was solid oak with a digital handle, and just as I was told, a mean-looking multi-pin deadbolt. Locked. This was my first real test. I pulled out the lockpick set, my hands shaking badly. I had watched hours of videos in that motel room. It looked so simple online. Insert the tension tool. Feel for the pins with the rake. I fumbled, the metal slipping in my glove. A single drop of sweat rolled down my back. I took a breath, trying to calm my hands. I tried again. I could feel the tiny metal pins inside the lock mechanism. Little steel guards keeping me out. I probed. I lifted, the first one clicked into place. Then the second. My whole world shrank to the feeling of cold metal in my hands, the tiny feedback it sent up my arm. The third pin set. The fourth gave way with one's last beautiful snap. The deadbolt was free. I turned the handle, slipped inside, and closed the door behind me. Damon's study was a shrine to chrome and dark wood, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on one wall. A huge oak desk sat in the center. A line of fire danced in a long, low fireplace. The room smelled of old books and scotch. On the desk was a half-full glass and an open tablet. And there, built into the wall of custom bookshelves, was the safe. A flush-mounted keypad with a dark glass face, completely hidden unless you knew where to look. It held his secrets. I needed the 4-digit code. My husband Julian and his mentor Damon shared everything. I prayed they shared this, their first major deal together. September 15th. Could it be? Was my husband that predictable, that proud? I knelt, the pressure from my pregnancy a dull throb. I had to try it. If I was wrong, if a silent alarm tripped, it was all over. I had no other choice. My finger hovered over the keypad, trembling slightly. 1988. Red light. The year they launched their investment fund, 2016. Red light again. Damon's ex-wife had left him years before. I had no clue when her birthday was. Panic was starting to tighten its grip on my throat. I was burning through precious time. I scanned the room, desperate for any kind of clue. People are creatures of habit. On his desk, next to the scotch, was a single framed object. Not a photo of a person, but a clear lucite block celebrating a business deal. The deal tombstone, his ego. I leaned closer. On the metal base, a small plaque was engraved. Project Nightingale, 2007. The year he and Julian had their first major exit. It was a long shot. I entered 2007. Red light, damn it. My time was almost gone. My eyes raced across the bookshelves. Business books, market histories, signed copies. And then I saw it. Tucked behind a row of biographies was a thin, worn-out paperback, The Prince, a cheap copy. A folded bar napkin was sticking out of it as a bookmark from a bar near their first office. A date was circled on it, June 4th, 4 digits, 0604. My hand shook as I typed it in, June 4th. A quiet, pleasant chime came from the wall panel. A green light glowed. A section of the bookshelf slid silently inward, revealing a safe. The digital lock was open. A shaky breath of relief escaped my lips. I pulled the heavy steel door open. Inside, everything was perfectly arranged. Stacks of hard drives in anti-static sleeves. My heart pounded as I read the labels. Project Cerberus, Axiom Genetics, and at last, a single black leather ledger with one word in silver, Prometheus. My gloved hands trembled as I lifted it from the shelf. I carried it to his desk, my phone's light cutting through the darkness. This wasn't a business document. It was a private journal, filled with sharp, angry handwriting that wasn't my husband's. The entries covered 3 years. Dates, actions, payments, and initials. My throat went tight as I read. April 10th. JS confirms clinical data flaw. DB initiates short position. July 22nd, JS leaks Phase 2 report. Takeover prep starts. JS Julian Sterling, my husband. It was page after page of his betrayal. My father's company was being gutted from the inside. Julian wasn't just a competitor. He was a saboteur. He had been feeding Damon every patent filing, every research problem. He even helped Damon poach the lead immunologist from my father's lab. All those sudden project failures my dad had been losing sleep over it was all here, written down in cold, hard detail. The numbers in the payment column made me feel sick. Millions. Next to a wire transfer for $10 million, a handwritten note. JS first installment. This monster was building our future by destroying my family. I grabbed my phone, fingers flying, taking pictures of every single page. The files were almost copied. The green progress bar was a slow-motion fuse in the dead quiet mansion. This was everything, the proof I needed to finally ruin them both. I was on the last transfer when I heard it, the quiet chime of the private elevator. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, the screen glowing with incriminating file names. The elevator doors parted, his confident stride on the stone floor outside. Marcus. He was home. I ripped the thumb drive out, slapped the server door shut, and hit the switch. The hidden panel slid closed just as the study door clicked open. There was nowhere to hide. The office was a glass box with a stunning view of the Seattle skyline and absolutely no cover. The only other exit led to a rain-slicked, exposed balcony. I did the one thing possible. I slid under his massive oak desk, curling into the chair opening, trying to protect my pregnant stomach. The space smelled of expensive whiskey and Marcus' cologne. The study door slid open. Hallway lights cut a beam across the floor, right under the desks. His polished Italian shoes stepped inside. I heard a bottle being opened, then the pour of scotch into a glass. He was coming straight for me. His shoes stopped inches from my hiding spot. I held my breath, my heart pounding so hard I thought the floor was vibrating. I could see the sharp crease in his suit trousers, his shadow swallowing me whole. He sat down. The leather chair groaned under his weight. The desk shifted slightly. I was just inches from his legs. Any sudden move and his foot would connect with me. He took a long sip of scotch. I heard him lift the receiver of his desk phone and dial. "It's handled," he said, his voice slick with triumph. "Your brother's little injunction was a complete joke." A pause. He was listening. To Genevieve. "It had to be." "No, it changes nothing," Marcus continued. "The old man has more fight in him than I thought. But a little fight won't stop a hostile takeover. He's finished. As for Eliza, she's gone dark. My security team lost her after she returned police plate, but she'll come back. They always come back for the money." Another pause. I could just make out the tinny sound of Genevieve's voice. "Your divorce is the least of my problems," Marcus snapped. "Just get it done. Get her signature. If she puts up a fight, we'll bury her with him. We'll plant the falsified records, make it look like she was part of the fraud. The Attorney General is a personal friend. She won't stand a chance." My stomach clenched into an icy knot. They were planning to frame me, to send me to prison, pregnant with his baby. "The original transaction logs are all on this server," Marcus said, his voice sinking to a conspiratorial whisper. "The one and only copy. My insurance policy. As soon as her father's company is worthless and Eliza is gone, we wipe it. We'll celebrate. Until then, it's perfectly safe." He let out a low, ugly laugh, and completely under my control. "Now, do your part. I need those offshore accounts liquidated by Friday." He ended the call. He drank again. I heard the soft of a stylus on a tablet. Then, total silence. He was just sitting there, planning. A drop of sweat ran down my temple. The cramp in my leg was agony. I couldn't risk moving. I didn't even breathe. The flash drive in my pocket felt like a live grenade. A death sentence if he found it. After what felt like forever, he sighed a deep, satisfied sound. He pushed his chair back. He stood. He walked from the desk to the bar against the far wall. I heard him pouring another drink. This was it, my only chance. While his back was turned, I had to go. Slowly, I began to uncurl myself from under the desk. Every rustle of my clothes sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. I rose to my hands and knees. I peeked out and saw Marcus at the bar, his back to me, looking out at the city lights. I moved into a low crouch. The door was only 20 feet away, but it felt like a marathon. I took one slow, deliberate step. A floorboard under the expensive rug gave a loud, sharp creak. Marcus went completely still. I could see his reflection in the window, his head cocked to one side. Listening, I froze, paralyzed by sheer terror. He didn't turn around. "I know you're here," he said, his voice chillingly calm. "The alarm system is silent. It just pings my phone when someone enters the office after it's been armed." My blood turned to ice. It was a trap. The whole thing. The empty mansion, the unlocked office, it was all a setup. And I fell for it. Slowly, he started to turn around. He held his drink in one hand. In the other was a slim black pistol, aimed directly at my heart. It looked completely natural in his grip. I was thinking a PI, maybe one of your father's pathetic lawyers. His cold eyes swept over me, from my dark coat to my panicked expression. Then his gaze dropped to my stomach, to the obvious swell of my pregnancy. A slow, cruel smile twisted his lips. "But you, the loving, pregnant wife. I'm impressed. Incredibly foolish, but impressive." My mind went blank with terror. I couldn't speak. "Is that the drive?" he asked, stepping closer. "Empty your pockets. Put everything on the desk. Now." I put my small kit on the desk. A burner phone, the copied drive, some tools. He gestured with the gun. "Your real phone." I placed my phone beside the burner. "And the coat. Take it off. Throw it here." I slipped out of my coat, the cool air raising goosebumps. I tossed it toward him. It landed by his shoes. He never looked down, his eyes locked on mine. "You wanted the server files, didn't you? Genevieve warned me you were desperate. I told her you were just a spoiled brat. I guess I underestimated you." He stepped closer. The gun was inches away. "Unlock your phone." "What's the password?" My heart stopped. If he saw those records... "Eliza, you can give me the password, or I can make one phone call and ruin your father's reputation forever. You'll be divorced and broke by morning. Now, which is it?" My hand trembled as I typed in the 4 numbers. The laptop screen flared to life. The last window open was a file explorer. A thumbnail showed a hotel reservation confirmation, a penthouse suite, clearly booked for 2, under Genevieve's name. Marcus' eyes went thin. "Give it to me." I picked up the laptop, my knees shaking so hard I could barely stand. I took 2 steps and held it out. As he reached for it, his eyes fixed on the screen, and that was my opening. It wasn't a plan. It was instinct. It was just pure, raw survival. I didn't hand him the laptop. I swung it with every ounce of strength I had, not at his face, but at the expensive Scotch glass in his other hand. The corner of the laptop hit the crystal perfectly. It exploded. Whiskey and glass sprayed across his chest. Marcus screamed in shock and pain, stumbling back as his hand recoiled. I dropped the laptop and lunged. Not for the door, but for the one weapon I could reach, a heavy bronze sculpture on his desk. I grabbed it, turned, and swung. It hit the side of his head with a horrible wet crack. Marcus's eyes rolled back. He just crumpled. The heavy sculpture thumped onto the thick rug. He collapsed a moment later, his body hitting the floor with a dull, heavy thud. I stood over him, still clutching the award, my breath coming in ragged, terrified gasps. He was completely unconscious. A dark trickle of blood was already seeping from his hairline, staining the cream-colored carpet. I'd actually done it. I knocked out Marcus Thorne. The thought was too immense to process. I had to leave. I grabbed my purse, the small hard drive, and my car keys. I left the laptop. It was ruined anyway. The data was the only thing that mattered. I took the hard drive from the desk. It felt solid and real in my hand. I shoved it deep into my coat pocket. And then I remembered the safe. The original documents. The entire reason I risked all of this. I ran to the wall behind his desk, my fingers fumbling with the hidden keypad, 1776. The panel slid open. I took the entire folder of offshore bank statements. Jamming it into my oversized purse, I slammed the panel shut. I gave one last look at Marcus, a broken heap on his own expensive floor. He was starting to groan, a hand twitching at his side. He'd be awake soon. I ran. I flew down the polished marble staircase through the cold, silent foyer and shoved the front doors open, not even stopping to close them. I hit the driveway and just ran. And there it was, a dark SUV idling by the curb, its lights off in the humid night air. The back door opened as I sprinted towards it. I scrambled inside. Go, Leo, go now! The car was already moving, pulling into traffic before my door was even shut. I slammed it and collapsed against the leather seat, my entire body starting to tremble with violent, uncontrollable shivers. Leo was driving. He didn't look back at me. You have blood on your hands. I looked down. My knuckles were scraped from the shattered glass and smeared with Marcus's blood. It's not mine. Did you get it? I patted the hard drive in my pocket. I got everything. And the house? Marcus was there. I had to use a sculpture. Peace out cold. For the first time, Leo's cool, big brother calm completely fractured. His eyes blew wide in the rearview mirror. You hit Marcus Thorne? He wasn't just surprised, he was genuinely scared for me. Oh, wow. Dad is going to have an aneurysm when he finds out. Where are we going? I asked Sext, the adrenaline dump making me feel sick. Somewhere secure. Somewhere he would never dream of checking. And somewhere we can figure out what you just risked your life and the baby's life for. He glanced at me again, his gaze fixed on my stomach. Then you can tell me what happens next. I tilted my head back, the Seattle city lights smearing into glittering trails of rain. I actually did it. I got the evidence. I fought back. But as the shock faded, the weight of what I'd done began to crash down on me. I assaulted my husband inside his own mansion. I stole corporate financial records. He was going to wake up, and he would know it was me. That man practically owns the Seattle tech scene. He has tech journalists on speed dial. This divorce wasn't just going to get complicated anymore. It had just turned dangerous. And I was the one who made the first move. The 10-minute incursion was over. The objective was complete. Now come the consequences. Our somewhere secure turned out to be a penthouse condo in a glass tower downtown, a world away from a dingy motel. We rode a private elevator directly to the top. The apartment was cold and modern, all polished concrete, stark furniture, and massive zinzos with a view of the stormy sound. A heavy steel door opened into a huge living room with one long couch, a glass table, and a built-in bar. The type of anonymous high-end place designed to keep secrets. Stay here, Leo said. Don't touch a thing. I need to grab the medical kit from the car. I collapsed onto the sofa, the exhaustion of the night finally catching up to me. I set the small silver flash drive on the glass surface. The little device seemed to hum under the track lighting. I pulled the heavy Steel Design Award from my bag, its sharp corners still sticky, and put it beside the drive, the twin trophies of my terrifying new reality. Leo returned carrying a small first aid kit. Without a word, he knelt down and took my hand, carefully cleaning the cuts with an antiseptic wipe. The sting was sharp, yanking me back into the present moment. He's probably awake by now, I whispered, my voice sounding empty in the quiet room. He-S calling the cops. He-S telling them what happened. Probably, Leo said, his eyes still on my hand. But he-S not getting the response he expects. Not right away. Why? He's Marcus Thorne. Because the silent alarm I had you trip wasn't connected to his high-tech security grid. It was routed to a different service. One dad has had on retainer for 2 decades. Any emergency call from that address gets automatically flagged, paused, and redirected. The first responders will be told it was a minor server glitch, a false alarm. They'll file a simple report and leave. Marcus will be furious, but he'll have absolutely no proof you were there. Not tonight. He'll just have a massive headache and a story that sounds completely insane without any evidence to back it up. His pregnant wife breaks into his fortress of a home and attacks him with his own award? It will sound like he was on something and hallucinated the whole affair. I just stared at him. The sheer level of foresight, of planning for every possible contingency, was breathtaking. Our father planned all this. Your father thinks of absolutely everything, and he always has a backup plan. Leo finished wrapping my hand. Now, let's see what all that bravery bought you. I slid the flash drive into his laptop, and the main folder bloomed open, files filling the screen. Leo pulled his chair closer, his eyes scanning the data. He was silent for a long time, his mouse clicking through encrypted messages, offshore bank records, and private chats with Sophia. His expression grew grimmer with every file he opened. "This is it," he finally whispered, his voice low and tight. "This is a mountain of undeniable proof. Hidden shell corporations, conspiracy to commit corporate fraud. He wasn't just having an affair, Eliza. He was building an entire second life with her, using assets he was actively stealing from you. He tapped on an account registered in Switzerland. That's the kill shot. It proves premeditated financial warfare. This isn't just about infidelity. It's criminal." "Is it enough?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's all digital. They can claim it was fabricated. It came from a drive on his personal server, and we have chat logs confirming he and Sophia were together on the exact dates these fund transfers happened. The photos on the drive lay out the entire timeline. This," he said, tapping the monitor, "connects every single lie. It's a perfect gift for our divorce attorney. But more than that, it's leverage, the kind of career-ending scandal that could utterly ruin a man like Marcus Thorne. So, what is our next move?" The question just hung there, loud and heavy in the silent penthouse. The obvious answer was to call our lawyer, but my husband, as he often reminded me, had half the attorneys in the city on his payroll. Who could we even trust? We do nothing with it. A new voice came from the doorway. Not a single thing. I whipped my head around, and there he was, my father. He looked 10 years older than he did this morning, the lines around his eyes carved deep with worry, but he stood tall. He was wearing a simple wool sweater and slacks, not his usual power suit. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield. He looked at me first, his eyes checking me for injuries, a flood of relief so powerful it nearly made me cry. Then his eyes dropped to the laptop screen and to the blood-smeared steel award next to it. His face hardened. "You went to the house." It wasn't a question, it was an indictment. His voice was dangerously quiet, humming with a controlled rage I had never, ever heard from him before. "You told me not to," I said, holding his gaze, my own defiance flaring up to meet his fury. "You told me to get on a plane to Vancouver and hide. You arranged a charity auction as a cover, but you never offered me a way to fight, so I went and found a way myself." "I gave you a way to be safe," he countered, his voice rising as he strode into the room. "A quiet, clean exit 1,000 miles away from him. Not a way to get yourself killed. Breaking into the mansion of a man who'd push you down a flight of stairs and call it a tragic accident. What were you thinking, Eliza? This isn't some corporate game. That's server." I pointed a trembling hand at the laptop. If they had found me with that data, my God. I did what I had to do. I shot back, struggling to my feet. "Marcus has a file on me. He was framing me. Dad, he and his legal team were going to plant evidence, make it look like I was his partner in crime, then have me locked up. What other choice did I have? Move to some private island and watch my own arrest on the nightly news? The awful truth settled in the air between us. My father closed his eyes, his face a mask of pure pain. When he opened them again, the fury was gone, replaced by a profound, weary sadness. I failed you, utterly. You created this monster, and you left me there alone with him. I didn't leave you alone, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. I left you an escape. I left you, Leo. You came to my office. You laid it all out for me. I struggled to find the words. You taught me the importance of a power play, the impact of one big, decisive move. Well, this is my move. I slapped my hand down on the table next to the laptop. I am not running. I am not hiding. Not this time. My father looked at me with something new in his eyes, something like respect. He gave a slow nod, as if accepting a hard truth he could no longer deny. Fine. He walked over to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down to face the evidence. Then we fight. But we do it smart. We use every piece of this. The whole truth. He glanced at Leo. Is this place secure? Swept an hour ago. The jammers are on. We're invisible. My father let out a long breath. The bankruptcy rumors, the fraud, it's all true, Eliza. The debt is real. I knowingly bought failing companies. I inflated our numbers to get more financing just to pay off the last round of investors. It's the oldest sin in the book. I got arrogant. I thought I could build my way out of any problem. My stomach clenched into a painful knot. So that was it, simple and ugly. But his voice turned to steel as he went on. This wasn't just a bad deal. I was set up. This was a systematic, coordinated strike against my entire company. Marcus, with Caleb as his inside man, was running a full-scale corporate sabotage campaign. They organized short-selling attacks against our stock. They filed bogus lawsuits to halt our biggest projects. They bribed regulators to deny our building permits. They fed fake scandals to the business journals. They poached my top engineers and my best project manager. They sabotaged a crane at our new headquarters. They backed me into a corner where my only option was to break the rules. He pointed at the burner phone on the table. This contains the complete record of their entire conspiracy. They didn't just profit from my fall. They orchestrated it. They are the reason for every single charge the SEC is coming at me with. I'm guilty of being a desperate man. They're guilty of conspiracy, racketeering, and outright corporate warfare. My world spun on its axis all over again. This wasn't just a powerful man who flew too close to the sun. This was an ambush, a king being deliberately torn from his throne. So why not go to the authorities? The SEC, the FBI. And say what? My father let out a bitter laugh. That my competition was fighting dirty without a single piece of proof? I'd look like some failed CEO whining that he got outplayed. This laptop is the proof, but it was untouchable. Julian held it over Leo's head, just to make him suffer. My only option was to spring their trap, let them think they'd already won. The bankruptcy, I murmured, the pieces suddenly locking together. A controlled implosion. He gave a slight nod. I knew they were coming for me. An investigation was certain, so I chose to lead it myself. I filed for Chapter 11, freezing all our assets and forcing every snake out into the open. I gave control of Sterling Innovations to a trustee, someone with legal power I no longer had. The power to subpoena records, to investigate anyone, not just Julian's venture firm. I ate the public humiliation, the destruction of my reputation, just to build a stage where the truth might actually win. It's a long shot, a massive gamble. I just stared at him, torn between awe and pure fear. He set fire to his own legacy, his fortune, his entire life, for just one last move. And that ridiculous press conference? All for show, just like you thought, he admitted with a tired smile. It was necessary. I needed to show Julian, and more importantly, show you that I wasn't out of the game, that the Sterling name still meant something, even if it was for a fake AI project in Seoul. I had to make Julian second-guess himself, make him sweat. A nervous opponent makes mistakes. He looked at me, his eyes softening for just a moment. I had to remind you who you really are. You're not his casualty. You're a Sterling. We don't shatter. The chaos was starting to make a twisted kind of sense, both terrifying and thrilling. So what's our next move? We take this to the district attorney? Not yet, my father said, his face becoming sharp, strategic. The old Arthur Sterling, the shark, was back. We have the ledger. They have no idea we have it. Right now, Leo is furious and broken, but he thinks he's in control, and Julian is arrogant, certain he's about to destroy you for good. We have the advantage of surprise, and we're going to use all of it. How? We set up a meeting, a divorce settlement negotiation. I gaped at him. What? After everything he did, you want me to negotiate with him? I want you to make him an offer he can't possibly accept while you're wearing a wire, with the Northern District of California recording every single word. The sheer audacity of the plan left me breathless. You can actually arrange that? The bankruptcy trustee is a retired federal judge, Eleanor Vance. She's brilliant, famously tough, and she despises Julian because of a hostile takeover he bungled in the late 90s. I've already had a quiet, off-the-record chat with her. She is very interested in any evidence that helps her manage the company's assets, especially proof of a criminal conspiracy to sabotage the firm. She has connections in the Public Integrity Unit. They would be thrilled with a case about corporate espionage and investor fraud, especially one involving a superstar venture capitalist and a tech empire. It was a crazy, high-risk play, using my divorce, my personal hell, as bait for a federal sting. He won't meet me, not after everything. He'll just have his lawyers handle it. He will meet you, my father said, his voice like solid steel, because the offer is to buy his silence, and it will come from your new counsel. My new counsel? The conference room door swung open. A woman in her late 50s walked in, with a sharp black bob, intense eyes, and an aura of absolute control. She was wearing a flawless, cream-colored pantsuit. I recognized her immediately from Fortune and the Wall Street Journal. Catherine Reyes, known as the matriarch. The most ruthless divorce attorney in all of Silicon Valley. A legal killer for the tech elite who fought battles where fortunes and futures were at stake. She was famously charged a fortune and never lost. Isabel, she said. Her voice was cool and measured. A pleasure, under the circumstances. I'm Catherine Reyes. I'll be your representation. I was speechless. How? I owe your father, she stated simply, setting a black leather briefcase on the table. A very large debt. And frankly, I can't stand Julian Vance. He's an arrogant, misogynistic bully who thinks his money makes him a god. I have been waiting for a chance to take him down for a very long time. This will be fun. She opened the case and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Here's the settlement proposal. The terms are simple. You agree to a quick, no-fault divorce. In return, Mr. Vance will immediately transfer the deed to the Nob Hill penthouse with no strings attached. He will also wire $75 million from his personal funds to yours in one transaction. In exchange, you will sign an ironclad non-disclosure agreement, giving up any right to ever speak of your marriage, your family's company, or any of Mr. Vance's business dealings. I nearly gagged. The offer was so preposterous, so outrageously arrogant, it felt like an insult. He will never, ever agree to this. It's a joke. Of course it is, Catherine said, a razor-thin smile touching her lips. That's the entire point. It's an opening offer so offensive it guarantees his fury. He'll demand a meeting just to put you in your place, to show you who's the boss, to prove he still has power over you. He'll want to watch you squirm. He'll want to savor his victory. And that's exactly when the trap springs shut. The wire, I whispered. Precisely. We'll hold the meeting in this very room. It's clean. The DA's team will be listening from a van across the street. You will be wearing a recorder. You'll needle him. You'll mention the ledger, the sabotage, Leo. You will show him a printed copy of the most incriminating email from the server. You accuse him of orchestrating my father's downfall. You give him every chance to confess. With Julian's ego, he won't be able to help himself. And if he doesn't confess, if he says cautious, Catherine's smile didn't waver. Then we go to Plan B. We leak the entire ledger to the Wall Street Journal. We file a $200 million civil suit against Vance and Leo, with the ledger as our primary exhibit. We ignite a media firestorm that will utterly ruin his reputation and crater his firm. The criminal charges will come next. He's done for either way. This meeting is just the quickest, most personal way to burn his world to the ground. I glanced at my father. He gave me a subtle nod. It's your call. This was it. The crossroads. I could take the crypto and fake ID he'd offered and just vanish. Or I could walk into that room, wired up, and destroy the man who tore my life apart. It wasn't really a choice at all. When? I asked, my voice steady and hard. Catherine looked at her watch. My office is contacting his legal team right now. The offer is sitting in his inbox. Knowing Julian's pride, he will demand a face-to-face meeting by tomorrow afternoon. We have to get you ready. We need to plan every word, rehearse every expression. We have to turn you into a perfect weapon for his undoing. She looked at my simple clothes, my tired face, the bruise on my arm. First, we get you dressed like a grieving daughter, not some trophy wife looking for a bigger payout. Arthur, the apartment is safe, my father said. I've already had some things delivered. I stood up, the weight of the plan, the baby inside me, the betrayal. This was a turning point. For the first time since my brother was betrayed and pushed out, I wasn't just surviving. I finally had a weapon, and I was aiming it right at the man who broke him. Leo sat up and came over, putting his hands on my shoulders, though I could feel them shaking. You don't have to do this, Isabel. We could just leave, head up the coast, find a quiet town, live a safe life. I met his gaze, the eyes of a brilliant man who had been utterly crushed. You never taught me to be safe, Leo. You taught me to build the future. A weary, proud smile spread across his face as he pulled me into a fierce, tight hug, then go and burn his whole damn world down. I followed Catherine and my father from the apartment, leaving the encrypted server details and hard drive on the table for the DA's office. I finally understood what Leo had been trying to teach me all these years. The patents were never the real asset. The investment funding wasn't the real strength. The real power was having the courage to expose a catastrophic lie. It was holding the undeniable truth in your hands. Power was turning your deepest pain into a perfectly designed trap. The last week had just been a rehearsal. The main event was about to begin. The safe house was a sleek condo overlooking the San Francisco Bay. The clothes they chose felt like a new skin, a simple, classic navy dress, a cashmere shawl, and low black heels. No jewelry, not even the wedding band he put on my finger. The whole look was quiet, focused, and completely unreadable. It was the uniform of a woman who was done grieving and was now in the cold, precise business of retribution. Catherine drilled me for nearly 3 hours straight. We sat at a glass table, the drive and her notes spread out like a military campaign. "Forget your feelings," she said, her voice like cracking ice. The anger, the sense of betrayal, all of it that's just fuel for him. He'll turn it on you. He will call you emotional, twist your meaning, and use every single weakness you have ever shown him against you. Your only emotions are calm disappointment and absolute conviction. You are not in there to ask for a thing. She told me my job was to lay out his choices. I memorized every word of the script she wrote. My delivery had to be cool, precise, and totally unflappable. We were in her firm's main conference room. I was already sitting at the head of the table. He would arrive, assuming he'd find me in tears. I would not stand up. My first words were, "Julian, Thank you for being here. Please, sit. Then, I've looked over the divorce papers. They are not acceptable. So I've prepared a more equitable version. I would then slide the new terms across the polished table to him. When his anger boiled over, I would say, "This is not a negotiation. It is a choice. You can sign, and the fraud you committed to steal my family's legacy will stay a private matter. Or you can refuse, and I will file this." I was to place the binder of evidence next to his pathetic offer. I would file it with the district attorney, the state architectural board, and the New York Times by 9 a.m. The complete digital trail proving the conspiracy would go live moments later. My key phrases were grand, larceny, wire fraud, and bribery. I was not to say, "You destroyed my brother." I was to say, "You conspired to steal proprietary architectural designs." This was about his felonies, not my heartbreak. If he got threatening, I would say, "Any threats or intimidation are being recorded as witness tampering. For my own protection, this entire meeting is being recorded and monitored." That was the kill shot. The bluff about being recorded would either force him to fold, or his monstrous ego would make him confess to everything, live on tape. We rehearsed it endlessly. I worked on the flat, business-like tone, the deliberate way I'd set the documents down, how my hands had to remain perfectly still. Miss Sterling was an exacting director. "Less fury. You are informing a subordinate of his termination." "Good. Don't lean forward. You aren't asking for anything. You are telling him how it will be." During a short break, my father came in holding a small, elegant pin, a microphone hidden inside a silver lapel pin. He carefully attached it to my blazer. "It's voice-activated," he whispered. "Crystal clear reception. The DA's people are in the office right next door. They will hear every last word. A detective is in this very room, right behind that tinted mirror." He nodded toward a dark glass wall I'd assumed was just for show. "It's for your safety. If he even raises his voice, they'll be in here before he can blink." "Will he have a gun?" I whispered, remembering his volcanic temper. "Building security will scan him in the lobby. It's mandatory for this floor. He'll be clean." But Elena, my father, caught my eyes. "The most powerful weapon he has is how deeply he knows you. He will target your every weakness. Your only job is to have none." At 3:15, Miss Sterling's burner phone chirped. She picked it up, listened, then simply said, "Understood," and hung up. "He's on his way." Our contact confirmed it. "Julian will be here at 4 o'clock. He's coming by himself. No legal team." He apparently told his assistant he was going to go handle his fragile, pregnant wife, personally. A cold, sharp smile touched Miss Sterling's lips. That arrogance. It's always their biggest vulnerability. The last few minutes were surreal. I was in my suit of armor, I was wired for sound, and I knew the script by heart. I sat alone in that sterile conference room, watching my own reflection in the dark mirrored wall. I barely knew the woman staring back at me. She was serene, icy, and prepared. The ghost of the wife who had collapsed on the floor of her brother's studio was finally gone. At 3:58, the heavy door swung open. Julian walked in. He looked, like he always did, like a king of Manhattan real estate. A ridiculously expensive suit, no tie, radiating a casual power that suggested he owned everything he saw. He scanned the room with a sneer, as if its corporate style was an insult. His eyes finally settled on me. He was expecting, I'm sure, to see me completely broken. A woman shattered by the last month, hollowed out by grief, her eyes begging for mercy. He didn't find her. His smirk faltered for just a split second, a flicker of confusion he immediately buried under his usual condescending charm. "Elena," he said, pausing near the door. "You look collected. I'm impressed. I thought for sure you'd be at some spa by now, trying to find your center after your family's unfortunate little setbacks." His voice dripped with false pity. I motioned to the chair across from me. "Julian, thanks for coming. Please, have a seat." He froze, momentarily thrown by the calm, by the command in my voice. He shut the door and sat, leaning back and crossing his arms. A classic pose of bored superiority. So, Miss Sterling, that's a power move. She must be costing you an absolute fortune. I trust my brother's final savings are paying her here. Although, I hear she sometimes accepts very creative forms of payment. What exactly did you have to promise her? I let his disgusting remark just die in the silent room. I placed my palms flat on the cold surface of the table. I have reviewed your settlement proposal. It is unacceptable. He actually chuckled. Unacceptable? Sweetheart, it's a king's ransom. $20 million to exit a marriage that was, let's be honest, just business. A deal that's no longer a good investment. You should be sending me a gift. I am here to present you with a counter-offer, I said, my voice like ice. I pushed Miss Sterling's one-page term sheet across the table. He snatched it up, his eyes flying across the page, the smug look on his face dissolving, then twisting into raw, disbelieving fury. He read it again, his knuckles turning white as he crumpled the paper in his fist. He glared at me, his expression a mask of pure contempt. Are you certifiably insane? Is this some kind of pathetic joke? 51% of the Hudson Tower development, all architectural rights revert to Michael's estate. Has the stress of all this finally cracked your mind completely? This is not a negotiation, I stated, my voice like stone, drawing strength from the lines I had rehearsed. It's a choice. You can sign, and our divorce, along with your little fraud scheme, can be resolved quietly. Or you can refuse, and I will file this. I slid the binder with my brother's original, dated blueprints to rest beside the term sheet, with the DA in every major newspaper before the markets open tomorrow. And here are the schematics for the shell corporations you used. The color drained from Julian's face. He stared at the documents, at the intricate flowcharts, the account numbers, the transfer records. His condescending swagger vanished, leaving behind a stark, terrified silence. Well, what is this? Where did you get all this? I just offered a slight smile. Where I got it is irrelevant, Julian. What's relevant is that it's all here. A perfect timeline of your conspiracy with Sophia to steal my brother's designs, real estate fraud, bribery, conspiracy, or your brother's idealism, he sneered, that he couldn't recognize the gold mine he'd designed. I didn't even react. I just held his stare, cool and unwavering. So, is that what Cobalt Holdings is for, Julian? Is that the shell company you used for Sophia's ridiculously large design consulting fees? My question landed like a punch to the gut. He actually flinched back in his chair. That one name, that single, secret detail, was all it took to shatter his composure. He was expecting a weeping, pregnant victim making desperate pleas. He never imagined he'd be facing the woman holding the receipts for his entire betrayal. His shock curdled into venomous rage. He slammed his fists on the table, leaning forward until his face was inches from mine. All I could see was the shine from the watch I gave him for our last anniversary. He smelled of entitlement. You stupid little girl, he hissed, the charming mogul facade cracking to reveal the monster underneath. Do you really think you can threaten me? You have absolutely nothing. These files, if they're even real, are buried under so many NDAs, you'll never see a courtroom. And this, he grabbed the term sheet, ripped it into pieces, and let them rain down on the floor, is garbage. My legal team will paint you as an unhinged, grieving widow. I will get sole custody of our child. I'll bury your father's firm in lawsuits until he wishes he'd never been born. This was the moment. Any attempt to intimidate me or to use my pregnancy as leverage will be added to the charges of witness tampering and obstruction of justice, I said, my voice unwavering, even as my heart pounded against my ribs. I glanced at a scale model of his new tower on the credenza, then back at him. So you're clear. This entire meeting is being recorded. His eyes followed my glance to the pin on my blazer. First came comprehension, then a surge of raw, animalistic fury. He let out a harsh, barking laugh. Recorded? Have you lost your mind? That's completely illegal, you idiot. My lawyers will have that thrown out before it's even logged into evidence. It's inadmissible. You just broke the law. I'm not the one facing a federal indictment, Julian, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. The recording is just for my protection. The actual proof is with the zoning commissioner you and Sophia bribed. What was his name now? Oh, that's right, Commissioner Davies. His whole tough guy performance just collapsed. I had the name from his secret ledgers. Proof that everything. You're bluffing, he snarled, but the words were hollow. It sounded more like he was trying to convince himself. Am I? I reached into the portfolio beside me, just one more piece of paper. I pulled out a color copy of a bank transfer confirmation. It showed the wire payment to a holding company owned by Davies, authorized by Julian's own encrypted key. I slid it across the table. He just stared at it. The last bit of color drained from his face. He saw his own digital signature. His hands began to tremble. He was a king watching his entire empire burn to the ground. Where? He whispered. How did you get this? Your girlfriend needs to be more careful with her photo backups, I said. And you have a pathetic need to document everything. June 5th? Seriously, Ethan? The anniversary of your first big buyout? You use that date for every password. It's just sad. The final blow. His own monumental ego, the date of his first major success, was the key to his absolute ruin. That broke him. The anger returned, but now it was the rage of a trapped animal. He lunged across the coffee table, not for me, but for the tablet, trying to grab it. It's doctored, he yelled. It's nothing! It's the ramblings of a failed inventor and his bitter pregnant daughter. No one will believe you. I am Ethan Vance. I built the tech that runs this city. You are nothing. He was screaming, his face flushed, his expensive designer jacket, suddenly looking cheap and desperate. This was the real Ethan. The viper I'd been sharing a life with. Your power is an illusion, I told him, my voice dangerously calm as I stood up. You built it on stolen patents and the ashes of my family's work, and all of that is over now. You have one option. You sign over my family's intellectual property, give back what you stole, and I let you vanish. Or you can fight me, and I will use every single file on this drive to make sure you spend the next decade in a federal prison. Your powerful board members won't be taking your calls from in there. He just stood there, breathing heavily, his eyes wide, a predator caught in a trap he couldn't escape. The reality of his situation was finally crashing down on him. The hidden recording, the data, the prepared confession. And then something in his face changed. The anger didn't vanish, it just hardened, twisting into something colder and far more menacing. A cruel, calculating look I had never seen before settled over his features. He slowly, deliberately, straightened his expensive tie, a pathetic gesture to reclaim his lost control. You know, he said, his voice dropping to a low, venomous whisper, there is always a third option. I just held my ground, watching him, saying nothing. We could make this entire thing just disappear. He took a single step closer. I didn't even flinch. You dropped this entire fantasy. You sign the divorce papers my lawyer prepared. You take the money. You move to San Francisco. And I make sure your family's startup doesn't get torn to shreds by its creditors. I have venture capitalists who owe me favors. I make one call, they get a cash infusion, a friendly acquisition. They'd be back on their feet before your baby is born. You could be the one to save their entire legacy. The only thing will cost you is your pride. And this he gestured at the tablet, dismissing my whole fight. This sad little campaign for revenge. He was offering me a deal. My family's survival for my silence. It was a brilliant, cruel strategy. It aimed for the one vulnerability he knew I still had, my love for my family. I felt my lawyer's precise instructions starting to blur in my head. This wasn't in the plan. This was real. My own justice, or my family's final chance to rebuild everything they had lost. I looked at this man, this monster who knew every single one of my weaknesses, and all I saw was a pathetic man making one last, desperate gambit. "You don't have that kind of influence anymore, Ethan," I said, and the certainty in my voice was absolute, because by the time you leave this penthouse, you won't have a company to leverage. But the tech journals will have a story. The SEC will. Your friends at the City Planning Commission will be so busy deleting their text messages, they won't even pick up your call. You have nothing left to bargain with. You're out of capital, out of allies, and out of time. The cruel smirk on his face cracked and fell, replaced by a deep, hollow dread. He knew it was true. He had no moves left. The private elevator to his penthouse chimed softly. The doors slid open. A woman stepped out. She was in her late 40s, sharply dressed, her hair pulled back professionally. She wore a dark pantsuit with an FBI badge clipped to her jacket. Two serious-looking men in plain suits stood just behind her. "Ethan Vance," the woman said, her voice professional and level. Ethan whipped around. "Who in the hell are you?" "Special Agent Ross, FBI White-Collar Crime Unit." She held up her credentials for him to see. "We've been monitoring your conversation. We have a few questions for you about Vance Innovations and your partner, Gregory Marsh. You are not under arrest. Not at this moment. But we will require you to accompany us to our field office for a formal interview." Ethan just stood there, dumbfounded, his mouth hanging slightly open. He looked from the agent, to me, to the damning evidence still glowing on the tablet. The sight of 3 federal agents in his sanctuary finally broke him. This is insane. "I want my lawyer," he finally choked out. "Of course," Agent Ross replied, completely unbothered. "You can call him from the car. He can meet us there. Now, if you'll come with us." One of the other agents took a small step forward, a quiet, firm gesture that made it clear this was not a request. Ethan Vance's shoulders slumped. The last bit of fight drained out of him. He moved like a puppet whose strings had just been snipped. He didn't look at me again. He just let the agents lead him out of his own apartment, a dethroned king being escorted from his own castle. The elevator doors slid shut. The silence in the huge, empty penthouse was overwhelming. I slowly sank into one of his ridiculously uncomfortable designer chairs, my knees finally giving out. The adrenaline that had carried me for the last hour vanished, leaving me exhausted and shaking. The elevator chimed one more time. My lawyer, Clara, walked in, right behind my older brother, Ben. His face was tense, but his eyes were blazing with a fierce, victorious light. "You were unbelievable," Clara said, and I could hear the real respect in her voice. "That offer he made about your family's company, that was a desperate last move. And you handled it perfectly. You didn't even flinch. You just took him apart." "He's not arrested?" I asked. Voice was barely a whisper. "Not yet," Ben said. He walked over and put a strong hand on my shoulder. "They'll question him for hours, show him just a piece of the evidence we gave them. Then they'll offer him a deal. Testify against Gregory Marsh for a lighter sentence. He'll crack." Men like Ethan always protect themselves. The goal wasn't just to stop him. It was to use him to take the entire rotten enterprise down. "The U.S. Attorney's Office is already prepared to review your family's hostile takeover case," Clara added. "This new evidence changes everything. It proves they were the targets of methodical corporate espionage. It won't erase the past few years, but it completely alters the legal facts. The court's original ruling is going to look very, very bad now. There's a very good chance we can get the entire sale thrown out. We aren't just trying to survive now. We're fighting for what's right. Justice. I hadn't let myself even consider that word in years. My brother spoke again. The car is downstairs. We need to leave before word gets out that Ethan Vance was just taken in by the feds. You need to be somewhere secure for a while. I nodded, pulling strength from somewhere deep inside me, and got to my feet. I looked around the penthouse, a battlefield of scattered schematics and an overturned chair. It was finally over. The lies, the paranoia, the endless stress of being married to Ethan Vance. As I walked out behind them, a new feeling grew in my chest, something warmer than pure revenge. It was peace. Not the peace of giving up, but the peace of a clean victory. The peace of seeing that monster for the scared little boy he really was. The peace of winning the one war that mattered, the one for my future. The stolen source code was in federal hands now. I watched Ethan get into the back of a black government vehicle. Suddenly, the divorce felt like a minor detail. The real war was over, and for the first time in years, I was the one holding all the power. The next few weeks were a blur of intense secrecy. I wasn't hiding in some cheap apartment. I was moved to a beautiful, sunlit house on Bainbridge Island with a view of the Seattle skyline. Ben joked that even he couldn't trace the ownership. A gift, he'd said, from some of our father's old colleagues. A bonus for a job well done. My new view was the entire city, a huge, clean slate of glass and steel that felt like pure freedom after living in Ethan's shadow. I disappeared into the machinery of the Justice Department. With my lawyer, Clara, I gave a sworn statement to the assistant U.S. attorney. I handed over all of it, the hard drive, the audio recordings, the incriminating photos. I even verified the signatures on certain contracts. In all the court paperwork, I was just source A, my identity completely erased from every public document. The case against Ethan Vance and Gregory Marsh was built quietly, meticulously, and with brutal efficiency. Then the stories began to leak, not all at once, but in precise, calculated strikes. The Seattle Business Journal ran the first piece, citing sources about a key witness in the Marsh investigation. Ethan S.'s handsome face, now looking exhausted and haunted in a grainy courthouse photo, was plastered all over the financial news networks. His company, Vance Innovations, froze all new projects. The venture capitalists could smell blood in the water. Then the national papers dropped their own bomb, linking billionaire Gregory Marsh to the federal investigation. They reported a forensic audit had found proof of a massive insider trading scheme. Marsh's lawyers claimed it was all a coordinated attack, but they sounded terrified. His company's stock fell 15% in a single afternoon. And just like that, I vanished. The reporters camped outside my old building were gone. The narrative had a new villain, and it wasn't me. I was no longer the tragic wife. I was a witness, shielded by the press. About a month after that office meltdown, a courier delivered a thick envelope, no returns address. Inside, a single sheet of heavy paper read, S.J. broke. He confessed to everything, all of it on the record. He's giving up the whole Operation Sterling, the offshore funds, the kickbacks. He's looking at 18 to 24 months in a cushy prison. His testimony will bury them. Sterling will fight, but he's done. The old man is finally going down. Another note for you. The deed to the penthouse is now in an LLC under your name. The title's clean. It's yours. Do whatever you want with it. V.S. I stared at the note, at Victoria Sterling's flawless initials. So, Julian had folded. He chose to save himself over his wife, exactly as we'd predicted. The entire divorce settlement was now evidence, and the penthouse, the scene of my greatest humiliation, was somehow mine. The irony was almost suffocating. I didn't feel victorious, just a hollow, quiet sense of justice, like the universe finally settled its accounts. Then my intercom buzzed. Ms. Smith? A Sophia Reed is here to see you. My doorman used the fake name I gave him for safety. My heart, which I thought had frozen over when it came to her, gave a single painful thump. I told him to let her come up. I was ready for anything screaming, tears, more lies. But the Sophia who stepped out of the elevator was like a ghost. Her usual swagger was gone. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, hair pulled back. She didn't look like a rival anymore, just a lost girl. She stood in my doorway, her eyes taking in my new apartment, the river view, all the proof that I had moved on. "Can I come in?" Her voice was barely a whisper. I just nodded and stepped back. I didn't offer her a drink. I just stood there waiting. She walked to the window. "It's of a beautiful view. Different." "It's real," I said. She actually flinched. After a long silence, she turned. "I came here, I don't really know why. I guess I had to see you. To see if you were okay." "I'm fine, Sophia. I know. I saw it on the news." She hugs herself. "Julian is a monster. I get it now. Maybe I always knew. But I wanted what he had, what you had. The power, the life. You wanted the prize." I corrected her, my voice cold as ice. "You never wanted to earn it. You just wanted to take it." She didn't fight me. She just nodded. One tear tracing a line through her makeup. "Yes, I did. And I was an idiot. He used me, just like he used you. He used me as a weapon to hurt you. I was just his latest trophy. And now that he's trapped, he's thrown me out. The FBI has already brought me in for questioning, asking about the Bahamas, about things he told me in private. I don't think I'm in serious trouble, but my name is now on some government list. It's over. The entire life I was trying to steal is gone, and it is all my fault. I just watched her fall apart. This woman was once my sister. Now she was a stranger crumbling in my living room. The rage I'd held onto for so long just vanished. All that remained was a tired sort of pity. "What do you want, Sophia? Forgiveness?" "No," she said, shaking her head fast, her hair flying. "I could never ask for that. I had to say I'm sorry, not because I was caught, but because I am truly sorry for what I did, for the betrayal, for being so horrible to you. The things I said in that garage were evil. I was so sick with jealousy I couldn't see straight. You were my best friend, and I burned our friendship down for a man who thought we were both disposable." She finally met my eyes, and hers were full of pain. "I'm leaving New York. I'm moving back to Rhode Island. My mom's sick, so I'll go take care of her. It's a good excuse to disappear." I said nothing. The silence was thick with the ghosts of 1,000 happier times, of a friendship that was now just ash. "I hope you find peace, Sophia," I said at last. It was the only thing I could offer her. Not forgiveness, just an end to the war between us. She nodded as fresh tears began to fall. "Thank you." As she was leaving, she paused. "For what it's worth, you were always the stronger one. I think that's why I hated you." And then she was gone. I went back to the window, watching the river flow towards the ocean. The last link to my old life was finally broken. My last meeting with my father was in his suite at the Lell Hotel. His case was also proceeding. His choice to cooperate with the feds had changed everything. His own charges were being massively reduced. He was pleading guilty to a single count of securities fraud. He was now looking at 12 to 18 months, likely in a low-security facility. He'd also pay enormous fines from his Swiss accounts, which were being seized. He was losing it all, his money, his reputation, his freedom, but he was going to keep his life and a shot at a new start. We sat on a balcony overlooking the city. He looked exhausted, but strangely calm. "That penthouse is yours," he said to me. "You should sell it. The money from a sale like that is enough to begin again, completely fresh." "I'm not selling it," I told him. He looked utterly shocked. "Why on earth not? That place is filled with bad memories." "Exactly," I replied. "It's my trophy, and I am going to sell it, but not publicly. I'm going to auction it, and every last dollar will go to a new foundation. The Ashcraft Financial Justice Initiative. It will give legal aid to people conned by men like Julian. It'll protect other whistleblowers. And it's going to teach financial literacy to those who need it most." My father just stared at me, his eyes wide, then a slow, proud smile crept across his face. You're turning poison into medicine. I'm turning a liability into an asset, I smiled back. You taught me that. He reached over and took my hand. I taught you about money. You, my girl, you learned about the heart. I am so incredibly proud of the woman you've become. After this entire nightmare, you didn't just survive, you came out stronger. I had a good teacher, I whispered, squeezing his hand, even when he was showing me the kind of person I never wanted to be. The morning of my father's hearing was crisp and sunny. He wore a simple suit and stood tall, his voice steady as he pleaded guilty. The courtroom was almost empty. It was just a formality, really, but I made sure I was there. My mother, Victoria Sterling, sat right in the front row. In the back, the bankruptcy trustee, Eleanor Vance, watched on with no expression. The judge, a woman known for being tough, accepted his plea and set his sentencing for 3 months out. She listed his crimes, one after another, and all the lives he had ruined. He just stood there, head bowed, taking it all. Afterwards, we walked out of the courthouse. A few cameras flashed, but the media circus was gone. It felt almost peaceful. The world had already moved on. He was old news. A simple black sedan was waiting, not one of his limos. My ex-father-in-law paused before climbing in. I have to go meet my parole officer, he said. And then I wait. I'll be there, I promised him. Every visiting day. He hugged me, a tight, almost desperate hug. I know. Now go on. Live your life. Build something real. I just stood on the sidewalk, watching the car vanish into traffic. I felt that old tightness in my chest, but I didn't cry. This wasn't an ending, just the start of a new chapter. A year later, I was at the annual Women in Finance Summit. I was a nominee for my work on the Phoenix Project. In just 12 months, we'd already funded over 20 lawsuits against predatory lenders, helped hundreds of investors, and launched a financial literacy program in high schools across 3 states. We had recovered millions for the victims. The Sterling name wasn't a Sescouncil anymore. It was a symbol of hope, a real shot at justice. I wore a simple blue dress and my mother's pearl earrings. For the first time in my life, I wasn't pretending to be someone. I was just me. I auctioned the Beacon Hill townhouse for $32 million, a new record for the area. Every penny went to my urban redevelopment fund. I lived on a simple director's salary and some very boring, safe investments. My new place was a bright, 1-bedroom apartment in the Seaport District. It was all mine. My name was on the deed, and no one else's. I had filed for divorce, claiming fraud and abandonment. With Marcus now a witness against his own father, the old man was fighting the charges from his mega yacht in Monaco, and he was losing. Our divorce was just a formality, finalized 2 months ago. I was Amelia Hayes again, standing at that podium, facing a room of Boston's most powerful women CEOs, politicians, artists. I felt none of my old fear. No need to be perfect. A year ago, I began, my voice strong and clear. I learned the world I knew was a lie, built on secret deals and the egos of men who thought money made them gods. I was raised to believe my only worth was in how I looked. I was told I was a problem to be handled. I saw women in the audience nodding. They knew that feeling. They all knew what it felt like to be underestimated. I was given a set of keys. They were meant to lock me away in a beautiful cage, to live a quiet, pretty, and shameful life. Instead, I used those keys to build something new, a place where truth mattered. I learned the best investments aren't stocks or real estate, they're in people, and in the courage to do what's right. I talked about the fund, about turning my private shame into an engine for rebuilding communities. I talked about second chances. I never said Marcus's name, or his father's. They were just footnotes now. I was the story. When I finished, the applause felt like a physical wave of warmth and respect. As I left the stage, women shook my hand, gave me their cards, and whispered their support. The crowd moved toward the bar, and that's when I saw him. He was standing by a marble pillar, half hidden in the shadows. My heart did a painful somersault. Ethan Cole. We knew each other at Boston University, what felt like 100 years ago. He was the scholarship kid from Southie, brilliant, driven, with an unshakable moral compass. We had a connection. Not quite dating, but way more than friends. We had heated debates in the library over coffee until sunrise. We shared one perfect kiss after we broke a story for the school paper. It felt like a beginning. But then Marcus's father said something cruel about him, and I, just trying to fit in, to please everyone, I let him go. Ethan knew exactly why. He never called me out on it. He just gave me this one long look with those dark, knowing eyes that saw everything, and then he was gone. I'd heard he became a Pulitzer-nominated reporter for the Sentinel, exposing corporate fraud. Like a modern-day hero, he looked older now. That fire in his eyes had become a steady, quiet confidence. He wore an expensive dark suit that fit him perfectly, and he was staring right at me. A small, unreadable smile played on his lips. I started making my way through the crowd, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He pushed himself off the pillar as I got closer. "Amelia Hayes," he said. His voice was deeper now, but that Boston accent was still there. Solid, real. That was one hell of a speech. "Ethan Cole," I answered, stopping just a few feet away. "I didn't realize you worked the black tie charity scene. I'm a fan of happy endings and new beginnings." His eyes, the color of dark coffee, searched my face. "You look different. In a really good way. You look like yourself." "It's just the flattering lights," I joked, trying to hide a sudden rush of nerves. "It's not the lighting." He finally gave a real smile, one that lit up his face and chased the shadows away. "I've been following the Phoenix Project. What you're doing is impressive, fearless." "Thank you. I hear you're the Sentinel's star reporter now, taking down corporate bad guys." "Something like that. Actually, my team and I sent your project an anonymous tip a few months ago. That data leak on the corrupt property developer? That came from us." I just stared at him, stunned. I remembered the note about a confidential source in our files, but I never dreamed it was him. "You never said anything. I wanted to see what you would build with it on your own." He took a step closer, and the sound of the party seemed to fade away. I have to admit, when I saw the news last year, the bankruptcy, the huge public scandal, I was worried. I thought the princess in the tower might not survive that fall. "Turns out the tower was a prison," I said quietly. "Falling was the only way I could get free." He held my gaze, and for a second, I saw the ghost of that college newsroom, the future we never wrote, and the life I'd thrown away. "I'm glad you got free, Amelia." "Me too." A heavy silence fell between us, filled with a decade of unspoken words. "Look," he started, rubbing the back of his neck in a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "This is probably terrible timing, and the absolute worst place for this, but I'm in town for a few weeks finishing that developer story. I was wondering if you wanted to get coffee or a drink to compare notes on fixing this city, or whatever." It wasn't a slick, romantic line. It was just a simple, quiet question. A hand reaching out from a past I thought I'd lost. I looked at him, at this man who was a living link to a different path, a more honest version of myself that I had almost buried. And I knew the woman I was now wasn't just a socialite or a cheated wife or someone who got revenge. She was someone who fought for other people and won. She was someone who could finally choose for herself, without being afraid. I smiled, a real smile from deep inside. "Comparing notes sounds a lot like work, Ethan. How about we just have dinner?" The look of shock, then the slow dawning of hope in his eyes, felt better than any applause. "Dinner?" he repeated, his own smile getting wider. "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I asked. He just nodded. It felt like a promise. He touched my elbow lightly. Just a quick, warm touch, and then he disappeared back into the crowd. He left me standing there, the silk of my gown suddenly feeling cool. The sense of a new beginning was so strong I could almost taste it. I looked past the glittering room, out at the Boston skyline bright against the dark. That chapter of my life was finished. The debts were paid. My former father-in-law was about to learn a thing or two about real justice. And I, Amelia Hayes, was free. Not just from a toxic marriage or a ruined family name. I was free to choose, free to build, free to just be. The start of my new life wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a quiet choice made in a very crowded room. It was a second chance, one that I was offered and one that I accepted. It was the simple truth that the most valuable thing I ever got back was myself. And this story, my real story, was just getting started.